Our next show begins in 5 minutes. This is intermission time, refreshment time. Visit our snack stand for hot dogs and other sandwiches, for ice-cold Coca-Cola, for a variety of ice cream, candy bars, cigarettes. We are here to serve you. You still have 4 minutes before the next show. Why not take a break, have a stretch, and visit our modern refreshment center? You'll find clean, conveniently located restrooms for your comfort. Better hurry. Next show starts in 3 minutes. But there's still plenty of time to go to the handy snack stand for a sizzling hot dog and a refreshing Coke, or for any of the many tempting items available there. Minutes until the next show starts. The refreshment center has plenty of freshly popped hot buttered popcorn and lots of other good things waiting for you. Drop over now.
For your convenience, our refreshment center will remain open when the next show begins in just a minute. You'll find a wide selection of tasty snacks and beverages available for your pleasure. Sizzling, steaming, griddle-fresh hot dogs in fluffy buns with your choice of seasoning. A large selection of appetizing sandwiches. Delicious, refreshing, ice-cold Coca-Cola. A kettle full of hot buttered popcorn, light and crisp, golden good to the taste. Fresh frozen ice cream and lots of other tasty items. Also, you'll find we carry your favorite brand of cigarettes. Make yourself at home. Enjoy the service of our refreshment center whenever you come to see us. Now, on with the show.
Well, hello there, and welcome to what month is this? This would be July. Welcome to the July live stream, Martin. Good to see you there. And I guess we'll see if anybody else pops in here. Um, Hopefully, you can hear me all right. I think I'm coming in okay. Um, the audio input says that I am. So hopefully, you can hear me. If not, just let me know. Um, oh, there we go. Kaiser's here as well. Excellent. People trickling in. That's good. Glad you like the previews. Sets a nice is it, it's a it sets a nice tone for things, right? The drive-in theater mid-century vibe and so on. Tonight's live streaming out Dinosaurs, and I apologize if I already seem like I'm low energy. Um, don't talk about too much, but I'm having a bit of a depressive episode. Um, so try and keep stiff upper lip and whatever, but might rely on you guys being funnier tonight than I am. So we'll see how that goes. Unfortunately, I do not have a dinosaur shirt, so I'm wearing my jellyfish shirt because they're older than dinosaurs, anyways. So that works out. And yeah, just I don't have a whole lot like really planned as far as uh, quizzes or questions or whatever. Just shooting the breeze about dinosaurs, which you end up doing like every live stream, anyways. Is shooting the breeze about dinosaurs, prehistoric life, dinosaur movies, dinosaur toys, the actual fossils that I've got here. I can pull some of those out and show some of those off as well. Whatever, wherever the evening leads us. So, hi, Queen. Hi, Kaiser. Hi, Martin. Glad to have you here. Glad to see the regulars showing up here. Jellyfish are invertebrates. Correct. Correct. Yes, they are. Actually, one of the I actually use this shirt when I'm teaching about fossils and stuff because this summer I've been doing a lot of tours and tour guiding, and one of the places I've been doing that is in the Rockies and doing these tours that go to the Burgess Shale, not the actual Burgess Shale site itself, because that's you have to book a tour with Parks Canada. It's like a guided tour. So it's a heavily secured site, but a Burgess Shale themed tour that goes to the lake that the Burgess Shale is above, and the visitor center in Field, British Columbia, where they have the fossils on display. And I talk about that and actually use my shirt as a part of my interpretation, talking about life before the Burgess Shale. So it's actually a really handy shirt to have. I'm glad I found this actually at West Edmonton Mall. So my video back there a few months ago, where we went to the Hasbro themed theme park in West Edmonton Mall, just north of Calgary here. I picked this up at the mall there as well on that trip. So it's an excellent purchase, I do think. Oh, Ashley's here. Hello. Martin just got back from G Fest. Nice. How was G Fest, Martin? I thought about if I want to go, but actually, if I was going to go to any Godzilla related convention thing, I would actually spend the dough and go to Godzilla Fest in Japan in November. That would be more my. I'd want to see like the full thing and the releases by Toho and see the Godzilla puppets in like real life and stuff like that. But uh, G Fest doesn't look like it's a bad time either from videos that I've seen of it. Fish were first life forms on Earth. Well, not life forms, but fish were. I mean, depends how you define a fish. But first vertebrates, yeah. Insects, yeah. It depends how you define an insect as well. Um, I mean, the first life forms were bacteria, things like that, single-celled organisms, leading up to like jellyfish and cyanobacteria, cnidarians, things like that. So like your corals and stuff like that, and then it's all very broad, but then arthropods, sponges, um, mollusks, all kind of evolving around the same time. There, that's one of the things that's cool about the Burgess Shale, is that it shows us this early diversification of life, and that's not even counting the The Ediacarans, what weird ass things those were, and I mean the fact that we're not even sure if the Ediacarans are actually animals or not, at least by any modern definition of an animal. So, so it wasn't even counting the Ediacarans. Um, but yeah. The Tale of G Fest. Yeah, Kaiser. Yeah, G Fest. I saw a few videos pop up on my feeds about people coming back from G Fest and their G Fest hauls and stuff like that. So here we go. Actually, it's Moss. Yeah, Moss. Very nice. Believe the reason why you don't have much viewers and subscribers is you talk about niche subject matter and your unpopular opinions. Well, gee, I haven't even done my video about how Star Trek actually has not always been woke. But yeah, I know. Everything I like is niche, and I don't get along with anybody else. Those are my two biggest problems. I actually was told by a girlfriend once that everything I like would be cool if I was 6 or 60, but because I was at the time, like 30 something, late 20s, 30 something, that wasn't cool apparently. So yeah, I know. I know that I like weird stuff that nobody else does, except for a very small niche number of people. Um, and I don't know how I feel about the fact that the most far-reaching and influential thing I've ever done with my life is a video about non-Godzilla Japanese movies and and Japanese King Kong movies. So that's a testament to my my influence on the world, I guess. Um, and then yeah, I can't get along with anybody. So, but I'm trying not to turn my channel into like a clickbait outrage thing. There's already enough like clownfishes and Diamond Gundams and stuff like that, which serve a necessary role in society. But that niche is already pretty full as it is. Not sure what I would have to add to it. So other than like King Kong's actually not that racist, so whatever. But she says we're here because we like the niche, so yes, excellent. Queens go to conventions all the time. Yeah, well, I've never traveled. No, I have traveled for a convention once, but that was partly work related. Um, but yeah, I just gone to conventions that are here in my city. Every year we have this anime convention. I didn't go to the last one because the year before, so last year's one, we didn't go to this year's one. Last year's one, my wife and I kind of looked at each other and were like, I think we've aged out of going to the anime convention because the anime conventions are less about anime now and they're more about sort of the cosplay and um, sort of general sort of soft geek culture that sort of circles around anime a bit. But as far as the actual like watching and appreciation of anime, it's not really there anymore. Anime conventions don't serve that function anymore because, well, like Crunchyroll existed and Funimation existed and Netflix exists now and stuff like that. So you can get all the anime you ever want to watch is online. So there you go. Except dinosaur anime. I'm trying to think if there's any dinosaur related anime out there. I know there's a sequence in Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, where they go to a Devonian era reef, but they have the Dunklosteus in there. Um, oh, and Ponyo has allusions to prehistory in Ponyo as well. Those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head that actually have prehistoric stuff in them. Um, let's see. Bet you got to the big animals like dinosaurs. Yep. Dinosaurs were the big because of dense oxygen-rich atmosphere at that time. Possibly, possibly. I know there was definitely higher oxygen levels during the Devonian and Carboniferous periods. That's when we get the giant insects, uh, and we know that there's the increased oxygen content partly because the size of the insects, because insects breathe through their shells, so their exoskeletons, so they can only be if the oxygen content is only so much, they can only get so big, right? The more oxygen content, the bigger they can get because the bigger they get, the thicker the exoskeletons have to be, and if it's too thick, they can't breathe anymore. So how big they can get is relative to how much oxygen there is. So these huge insects during the Devonian and Carboniferous are evidence that it had higher oxygen content in the atmosphere. And we also find evidence for more widespread and violent, like forest fires and stuff like that, wildfires, in those time periods as well. So, but I'm not so sure about um, during the Mesozoic. I know there's a lot of speculations like how did dinosaurs become like the largest land animals that have ever existed? And the best explanations I've heard from scientists I've talked to about it is basically just evolutionary arms race. They just got that big because they could get that big, and they had evolutionary pressure from the supergiant predators. And as for why mammals have never gotten that big, we haven't been around for as long as the dinosaurs have. Like we haven't been the dominant land animal for as long as dinosaurs were around, because dinosaurs didn't start out as the dominant land animals either. And mammals also have slightly different energy requirements than say like a sauropod dinosaur does. Um, like for us to, because we are very high energy animals, for us to get super big would require a lot of energy and probably a lot more than like a sauropod would require. So we haven't got that big yet. Although, oh, I forget the name of it, but that one from Mongolia. It's like that super huge relative of like rhinoceros. Um, those guys were getting dinosaur size, right? Um, it says, I don't mind the stuff you talk about. Hooray! I'm glad. Thank you for not minding the stuff I talk about. No, I really do appreciate that you guys come out here every month for these live streams. Um, it does help me feel like we're, there's somebody that likes what I do out there, and that we're building a nice little community here with the regulars showing up. What's your favorite dinosaur? Queens is T-Rex. Kaiser likes Brontosaurus. Excellent. My favorite dinosaur, probably a bit of flux right now. I used to really like Utahraptor. Um, if I was asked what's your favorite dinosaur, boom, that would be my answer. Um, but I've started to have a lot of affection for Pachyrhinosaurus lately. So Pachyrhinosaurus is, where do I have him? Not on display. Where did I put him? It's around here somewhere. There he is. So Pachyrhinosaurus is these guys. So the ceratopsians with the nasal boss on there. In fact, this specific species, this is Pachyrhinosaurus lacustri, which is known from sites here in Alberta, which I'm blessed to live in, like one of the great paleontological meccas in the world. So this is an Alberta species of Pachyrhinosaurus. So these guys are growing on me, as I have a lot of affection for Pachyrhinosaurus lately. So I might be potentially induced to say that these guys are my favorites now, as of this moment. But we'll see. We'll see. A lot of my attention lately has been more on, lately as in like the last like 10 years, has been more on like Ice Age stuff, 'cause I wrote my book about the Ice Age. And right now, especially on Paleozoic and the Cambrian, like the British Shale, that kind of thing. So I'm learning a lot more about those, and the dinosaurs have kind of slipped by the wayside a little bit. But still love dinosaurs. Who doesn't, right? I don't know what's wrong with the adults who stop liking dinosaurs so much. Um, Mouse wants to create the time, Marco, that we became the dominant species. Yeah, well, dinosaurs had to go leave all those niches open for us to take over. So, yeah, why choose? Exactly. Yeah. Martin. While at G Fest, I picked up some of the King Kong 1933 Konami figures of Kong and the Empire State and Brontosaurus and the Pteranodon. Yeah, I've seen those. I've seen listings for those. At some point, I might get those. Like just buy a whole box of them and just get the whole set all in one spew. But yeah, what Martin's talking about are these bottle cap figures. They're just little plastic like PVC figure or statue things, put up by Konami in blind boxes. And they had two lines of them. One was the 2005 Kong, one was the 1933 Kong. And so I'd like to get the 33 Kong set. And I said someday I'll just go on like eBay or Buy and just buy a whole box and just get it over with and get them all at once. Like the colors on that Triceratops, like this like this, the Pachyrhinosaurus was good. Um, yeah, I actually painted him a bit. So the original model, this is by Batat. So the original toy had this beige color, and then it had this sort of purplish, maroonish dots, but they weren't on there very well. They didn't look very good, so I actually painted it up a bit, and I um, connected the dots here with sorry, again where you can see them. Added in some more of the lines, deepened some of the colors, made some of the shades a little more nuanced in there, like a little look a little more organic, basically, instead of just airbrushed on. And I also painted up the nasal boss and stuff like that to emphasize those a bit more. So I do customize my dinosaur figures. Sometimes it's just because I use them in education, so they do get beat up a little bit. So I do have to like repaint them periodically so they look good again. Um, but this one is a case where I just like emphasize the paint job you already had on there. There's others that I completely repainted. In fact, let's see if I can. Where is it? There it is. So like here's my Edmontosaurus. This is Safari Edmontosaurus, and I've actually completely repainted it. Originally, it was like some gross, like kind of orangey color, I think, if I remember correctly. But he's been. I don't see. I have to like repaint it because he's been scuffed up a bit. I've actually painted this based on an illustration in a DK book during Kindersley. They're dinosaur books for kids. They have like really great looking paintings and models in them, and so I painted this to look like one of those because I thought it was a good design on it. So this is one I completely painted up myself. I haven't done any videos on customizing dinosaur toys because I just haven't. Most of these I actually did before I started my channel, really. So yeah, it's what it is. Love King Kong merchandise. Have some myself. Well, yeah, excellent. I haven't actually got anything new since the last time I did a video showing my collection. I don't think I have. The last new things I got, yeah, were those the X Plus soft vinyls of the 1933 Kong. Those were the last things I got. I'm still looking for those Sega plushes, but they haven't really popped up on Buy. When I go looking on Buy lately, like there's nothing on there that is interesting me, which is great because my finances aren't exactly like all that in a bag of chips. So it's good that there's nothing for me to buy, frankly. Wasn't for some random meteor, we probably wouldn't be here. Yeah, that's probably true. Who's your favorite paleo artist? Who is my favorite paleo artist? There's a guy who's become like really well known in the last decade, and suddenly his name is escaping me. Julius Costioni. He's become sort of like the go-to paleo artist now. So he's probably my favorite one that's currently active. I did like Greg Paul's stuff when I was younger, but it's a little too dimensional. For classic paleo artists, Charles Knight, of course. And actually, all the art that I've used for this thing, so the thumbnail and for my little sidebar here, that's art by Zdeněk Burian, who's a Czech artist in the early part of the 20th century. So his work is really captures a lot of that sort of like old school like reptile saurian dinosaur stuff. So that's why I wanted to use his art for the thumbnail and everything for this live stream because it's very retro. Martin says, I've been reading the dinosaur manga called Dinosaur Sanctuary, which is more for younger readers, still pretty good for older readers. I will have to give a manga about dinosaurs a shot. Yeah, certainly. Favorite authors who've written about dinosaurs? Yeah, well, I mean, one of my favorite books is The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So much so that I like have become like an expert on it, and especially the 1925 film. I think I've mentioned before how like I weirdly became like an expert on that movie by accident, just by virtue of having a website about it when like websites were still a new thing, and nobody else had done a website about it. I just kept learning and learning, and suddenly I became this expert doing original research and like the Academy of Motion Picture archives and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say like Conan Doyle Lost World is my favorite dinosaur related book. novel. Burroughs Burroughs is fine. I mean, he's not exactly like high art as far as a writer goes. Um, he reading like the John Carter books is wild because this first one starts out relatively like sensible, and then by the end it's just like it's the entire plot is driven by coincidence, like just the right people happen to be in the right place at the right time, and everybody just swoons over how awesome John Carter is. but um, but yeah, I mean that's hard to compete with, like Burroughs and Plucidar, those books. I do have a copy of Raptor Red signed by Robert Bacher. Except I wouldn't say Raptor Red is a great book. Um, he's a little too Bacher was a little too intent on like using a lot of modern analogies and comparing things. So there's that. Um, to Cory from Robert Bacher. Um, yeah, it's a little too much like yeah using modern analogies for things, thinking that like you can relate to it more if he relates it to something that you know, which is really poor animal writing. If you want to know really good animal writing, read Bambi. The original Bambi book by Felix Salten is amazing, and it's not quite that good. Oh yeah, and Dinotopia. I love Dinotopia. The sort of the latter stuff like First Flight and the some of the novels by Alan Dean Foster are a bit like me, but the first two Dinotopia books, Land Apart from Time and The World Beneath, are amazing. I love, especially the first two Dinotopia books are fantastic. TV show not so much, but yeah, the books are awesome. Um, Best Guest Charles Knight. Oh, Zimzilla is here. Okay. Um, The Land That Time Forgot, my favorite book. Yeah, that's a pretty decent one. Got me into a movie. Yes, Land Time Forgot with oh shoot, why can't I remember his name now? Um, he was also in Journey to not the other Edgar Rice Burroughs one with Peter Cushing in that. Suddenly I can't remember it, but they were like these ones by Amicus. Um, Land That Time Forgot. 74, British film. Doug McClure. That's the guy. And then People That Time Forgot, which is like, it exists as a movie. They forgot that dinosaurs should be in it. Um, yeah, and then what's the At the Earth's Core? That's the movie with Doug McClure and Peter Cushing in it. That's a Burroughs film. Arthur Conan Doyle was so talented, he also wrote Sherlock Holmes. Yes, and he wrote The Lost World to get away from writing Sherlock Holmes, because he actually didn't really care for Sherlock Holmes as a character, and he was like, I have so much more I can write than just detective stories. So he killed off Sherlock Holmes and started writing like historical novels, stuff like that, which is why he actually got a knighthood. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle got a knighthood, became a sir because of his historical fiction. Um, and he brought Sherlock Holmes back, but he still was like meh on writing Sherlock Holmes. So that's when he created Professor Challenger. That's where the Lost World comes from. I love the movie they made about John Carter. Yeah, I mean, it's not. That was a case where it's like I didn't think it was any worse than stuff that people like. Like I've seen more of the Marvel movies than I really would care to, and because I'm not really a big fan of them. Um, and I didn't see how John Carter was any worse than any of those movies. But for some reason, it just didn't resonate with people. A lot of people didn't bother to see it. Disney didn't bother to advertise it, and yeah, and it sucks because I've read the first trilogy of John Carter novels, and so I have an idea of like where they would take that trilogy with how they did it in the first film. But we're never gonna know, are we? Because they're not gonna make it. So we're SOL on that one. Um, we haven't had more Burroughs on screen with the exception of Tarzan. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have Pellucidar and John Carter and stuff like that. I would have loved to have seen that Disney John Carter trilogy, but that just didn't happen. Um, the show I've seen with the most Burroughs stuff in it is actually Disney's Legend of Tarzan TV show. They did a TV cartoon um, that actually has like Pellucidar and Opar and stuff like that in it. So the animation was kind of sucky, but um, I liked that they pulled a lot of ideas for the series from other Burroughs books. The only thing it didn't have was John Carter in it, which would have been fun. Have you watched Zimzilla's Road to Godzilla about the Lost 925? And he is here in the chat. Um, I actually haven't, and I think if you are who I think you are, oh, Zimzilla is not showing up on my participant list. Um, but I think he actually emailed me through my Lost World website about that. But I check that's a like virtually defunct email account on there. So I think he emailed me about information about the Lost World, but I didn't get the email until after he finished his video. So I feel really bad about that. And I make a point of checking that email more often now. Um, but I wish I had seen it before so I could have helped him out. So I feel a little bad about that. At the Year's Core needs a remake. Yeah, I can get behind that. The '70s films. I don't know if I've talked about this, but we'll probably talk about this next month with the next live stream. Um, but yeah, you have like all these Victorian science fiction films in the '50s and '60s. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Around the World in 80 Days, Journey to the Center of the Earth, The Time Machine, Mysterious Island, First Men in the Moon, and on and on and on. And it tapers out after 1968, right? Because 1968 is this like watershed moment in science fiction where you get 2001: A Space Odyssey. And in culture, the culture changes. This is Summer of Love and Stonewall and the Civil Rights Movement and Vietnam War, and all these things are happening. Nobody really has a lot of patience for Victorian science fiction movies, but Amicus Production tries. Hammer had some ideas for things. Was it Pterodactyls versus Zeppelins or something like that? Was a movie idea they were going to do. We never got around to it. But you have like those Burroughs movies, the Land That Time Forgot, People That Time Forgot, At the Earth's Core. You have the Asphyx, which is like this little weird sci-fi horror movie, and Disney's Island at the Top of the World. But none of them stick because in the '70s, like nobody cares about Victorian science fiction. That was a '50s and '60s thing. So, yeah. And then by the '80s, well, nobody cared about it still because, uh, '80s is all Spielberg and Cameron and Lucas and all that stuff that they're doing, right? The villains in that story, the Mahars, yeah. Intelligent Pterodactyls. Alexander Skarsgård played Tarzan in the most recent live-action Tarzan movie. Yeah. Margot Robbie played Jean. Oh, I didn't know she was in that. I haven't actually seen that version. I, I've alluded to probably a number of times now that I don't really watch a lot of modern movies anymore. I just have no faith in Hollywood to make anything that's worth watching. I was almost interested in Barbie until I started seeing reviews and plot summaries. I'm like, I'll pass on that one now. Probably go see Dune because we saw the first Dune. The Villeneuve version of Dune here. It was fine. It was fine. I'm kind of actually interested, weirdly enough, in Wes Anderson's new movie, Asteroid City. That's because I do like his aesthetics, but also having been to Northern Arizona and gone to Meteor Crater and stuff like that, I'm kind of interested to see his like quirky hipster take on it. But that's it for like new stuff. Otherwise, it's just classic series movies and stuff. I don't have a lot of faith in Hollywood to produce things that aren't going to enrage me for one reason or another. Usually just bad writing. So and there's a million old films. There's already more films that exist than anybody can watch in their lifetime. Still working my way through the box set of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers that I bought. I also got a DVD of a set of William Castle's Western movies. William Castle, famous for like The Tingler and House on Haunted Hill, and 13 Ghosts and stuff like that. His sort of gimmick horror movies. But he did westerns before those, so I got a set of those, working my way through those too, which is like fine, fine. I like old movies, I even like old bad movies better than I like new bad movies. Been currently reading Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. Highly recommend it. Yeah, well, sure, I can look that up. 1 Million Years BC is one of my favorite movies. That's a good one. I mean, Raquel Welch, hard to go wrong with that. Ray Harryhausen doing the... It is... Yeah, 1 Million Years BC is Harryhausen. Or it's the sequel that's Jim Danforth, right? When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. I think that's Jim Danforth did the effects for that one. But yeah. Those movies came out this summer, flopped. Yeah, that they did. I think, I mean, I hope... I mean, hard to know why, and it's hard to predict people, but I mean, I hope that it's just because a lot of people are just, like, the silent majority is just kind of losing faith in Hollywood to produce good entertainment. So, but, I mean, everybody and their dog apparently went to see Barbie and Oppenheimer, so, more power to them, I guess. At least Christopher Nolan's a good filmmaker, so, I mean, one can reasonably infer that Oppenheimer's probably good. I wish they had released a Jurassic World sequel. I'm not sure if you're saying that sarcastically or not, Queen. Weren't there 2 Jurassic World sequels? Or do they not count? I have my opinions on Jurassic World, and they are not complimentary opinions, so I will just keep those opinions to myself. I thought it was wasted potential not to have any prehistoric creatures in the island at the top of the world like mammoths. Yes. Now, to be fair, in the original novel, The Lost Ones, by Ian Cameron, there are not prehistoric animals in that one either. So, Disney didn't put them in their movie version of it either. But I actually did, a million years ago, write a story, and we're talking like 20 years ago, write a crappy story about, set during the Klondike Gold, I think I mentioned this before, set during the Klondike Gold Rush, where a group of explorers and a Mountie, and an Inuit person, go to Canada's Arctic, and they find a valley with there's woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats and ice age fauna. That story, it got published online as an online comic, for whatever many chapters it was. But pretty low tier. When you're doing an online comic strip, it's like pretty basic. I did write it up as a novella, like meant sort of more for kids. But no takers on that, and understandably so, because my strength is not in writing fiction. My strength is in writing nonfiction. Hence why I do have a published book on just a nonfiction book about the Ice Age. But I have thought now and then if I'd like to revisit my story, my fiction story, and try and incorporate more, make it more didactic, and incorporate more of like the actual paleontology and stuff into it, and see if that would make it any better. But I'm also lazy, and I don't do anything with my time except, well, right now I'm doing all tours and stuff, but sitting at my store and doing nothing, getting in fights with people online, whatever, trying to come up with content for my YouTube channel that a couple hundred people view, whatever. So I haven't turned my attention either to this fiction story idea or the second edition of my Ice Age book, which I really should be doing, because my Ice Age book, as it is already out of date, and I only published it like 3 years ago. But we'll see here. But yes, Vikings versus Mammoths would be a great story idea. I don't think I'll steal it, because then I'm transparently stealing from on the top of the world. But Vikings versus Mammoths, that's a 10,000 BC-esque movie waiting to be made. William Castle came with some weird gimmicks to sell his movies. Yes, I wish I could experience William Castle's movies with the actual gimmicks as well. The only one that you can kind of replicate is 13 Ghosts, because all you need is a red-blue pair of 3D glasses, and you can replicate the effect. And what's neat about 13 Ghosts is that if you have the glasses to watch it with, is that you can change what the movie's about when you do that. Because if you watch it with the ghosts, when you see the ghosts, then it's like a horror movie of these ghosts haunting these people. But if you don't, if you watch it without the ghosts, then it's just about this like family slow descent into madness. So it's actually really interesting to like watch it in these different ways, depending on how you watch it with the gimmick. So 13 Ghosts is actually 13 Ghosts might actually be my favorite of William Castle's movies. Um, I mean, House of Haunted Hill is fine. The Tingler is fine, but 13 Ghosts, because you can watch it with the gimmick. Mr. Sardonicus is also actually a good movie. That's another Castle one. Even though you can't actually vote on what should happen to Mr. Sardonicus. But 13 Ghosts I think is my favorite because how you actually use, because you can still do the gimmick and how you do it changes the movie, which is really neat. This kid, I like The Last Dinosaur. I actually have not seen The Last Dinosaur. He had a dangling skeleton in the theater for House of Haunted Hill. Yeah. We need more dinosaur movies. Yes, we need more dinosaur movies. I agree. And accurate dinosaur movies as well. I would like to see somebody actually put in the effort to make a dinosaur movie where the dinosaurs are actually accurate. They actually put in the work to, if Adam Driver is going back 65 million years ago in North America, the ecosystem is actually what we know of that ecosystem from that time based on the science. That would be amazing in my books. But they don't do that because Hollywood's Hollywood. So we have to content ourselves with documentaries like that new dinosaur one, Planet of Dinosaurs or Dinosaur Planet or whatever that one on Apple is, which I have not watched yet. I still mean I should watch it, but I just haven't had the means to do it. Valley of Gwangi is one of my personal favorite movies. Can't go wrong with Cowboys and Dinosaurs. I agree. I do think Valley of Gwangi is right up there for dinosaurs. I think that's one you actually could conceivably do. Excuse me. You could conceivably do a remake of that could actually be half decent. You just need someone who cares enough to get it right, which I mean, I guess you could say that about every remake. But if you had, because where you could strengthen it is you have these cowboys go into this valley and you see more dinosaurs, right? It's a more fleshed out ecosystem. It's not just like the 3 or 4 dinosaurs that actually are in the movie in this desert landscape. It's like you actually go to this valley and boom, it's like this full thriving prehistoric ecosystem, which is a lot like how they did it in the Turok Son of Stone animation. So there's that a gazillion years ago, they made this direct-to-video animation for Turok, where they go to this valley and there's this whole ecosystem and everything. Crib that idea, right? And I think you actually could conceivably make a half-decent Valley of Gwangi. Of course, the problem is, one, nobody cares about cowboys anymore. Western's a dead genre. And two, is do you trust modern Hollywood to actually make it better? And I don't. See, Journey to the Center of the Earth with James Mason. Yes, Journey to the Center of the Earth is a great movie. It's too bad the dinosaurs are just reptiles with frills on them. But what I like about, now we're getting ahead of next month's live stream. But what I love about Journey to the Center of the Earth is that it's actually a science fiction movie. Because there's lots of science fiction movies that have nothing to do with science, like Star Wars, for example, is just a fantasy movie, but it's like a high-tech one and takes place in outer space and it's got aliens, so it's science fiction. But there's also like anti-science fiction, where it's like, here are the horrors of science and the horrors that science is going to unleash on us. It's nicknamed like anti-science fiction. But Journey to the Center of the Earth, like, it begins and ends with just the passion of scientific discovery. And James Mason at the end of the movie does this whole speech about like how proper science is done and how we have to go back and get evidence and we have to explore and the wonders of science and everything else. And it's like, this is perfect. I love this. That is actually like a movie that is scientific in its outlook as well, and it's actually like complementary to science, and science is this grand adventure of discovery rather than this like colonialist horror is going to destroy humankind or something like that. So yeah, I enjoy Journey to the Center of the Earth a lot. Love I Love Ganji, one of Ray Harryhausen's best. Yeah, the Ghost Viewers. If you had to vote if Mr. Sardonicus would be punished, yeah, Mr. Sardonicus only had one ending. I've heard with Mr. Sardonicus, I've heard conflicting stories about that. The thing with I mean, the gimmick might have just been a total fraud, and there only ever really was one ending. Who would check up on it, you know? But I've also heard that the point was moot because everybody voted to punish him anyways. So it didn't matter if there was another ending because they never aired it because everybody always voted for him to be punished. A book about the Ice Age. Then you probably watched that Ancient Apocalypse nonsense. I did not watch that Ancient Apocalypse nonsense. I have no idea what you're talking about, which sounds like it is for the best. Ice Age stuff is a bit touchy because when you know a lot about a particular niche subject, at least for me, I become a lot more critical about how it's presented. So I think I've mentioned before that I've thought about getting a copy, and my wife has thought about getting me a copy of Far Cry Primal, the video game. But when I've seen like footage of it, it's like I can pick out the things that are wrong, and that's gonna bug the hell out of me, and it's gonna not make me enjoy it. 10,000 BC. I mean, that's a whole other thing there. My favorite Ice Age movie is actually Brother Bear, the Disney cartoon. That's actually weirdly like the most accurate Ice Age movie because don't get started on the Ice Age movies. Like those are something else too. But I think where Brother Bear managed to pull it off is that it's not about the Ice Age. It just takes place during the Ice Age, and it takes place like Alaska, which so most of the animals are animals we know anyways. It's just that in the background you'll see a mammoth or there's a giant sloth or whatever are around, but they're not like the focal point of the story either. So when it's that low resolution, it works out fine. And Brother Bear is a reasonably engaging movie. Even better with the audio commentary by the Moose, who are basically Bob and Doug McKenzie, those characters. Which, if you're Canadian, that's near and dear to your heart. So it's hilarious audio commentary on Brother Bear. But that's probably my favorite Ice Age movie, just because it's not about the Ice Age, so it actually works out a lot better than movies that are supposed to be about the Ice Age and get everything wrong. It's 65 recently, but nobody went to see it. 65 reminded me of After Earth. Yeah, that's what I hear. Oh yeah, another Ice Age thing is that stupid The Bray show. I watched like one episode and 10 minutes of the next one, and when I could figure out that they were in the Ice Age and they could not figure out they were in the Ice Age, I gave up on it. Like, no, I'm smarter than the show is, so forget it. Just finished it, did the MST3K treatment along the way. It's hilarious. Yeah. Turok needs a live action version. I would love a live action Turok. If it was like the animation. I really liked how they did it with the animation. And that's one of those things where it's like because diversity and inclusion is such a controversial subject in certain quarters. That where you don't need to race swap anything. Like it's a story about indigenous people. It should have indigenous actors in it, right? And there's lots of great indigenous actors in the United States and in Canada that could be in Turok, and it would be perfectly like organic and good, and I would love to see it. I would love to see a Turok movie. Whether or not they make one is I see Native American protagonist. Yeah, exactly. Anti-science fiction was genre from the 50s. Well, 50s is weird because you have the anti-science fiction, but you also do have a lot of the narrator intoning about the wonders of science and discovery and stuff like that, right? And you have these movies like Rocket Ship XM and Destination Moon, which are really just like space exploration procedurals. Like they're just about how we would go to the moon. And the drama is just in whether or not they succeed. So I wouldn't say the 50s is all anti-science fiction. I would say actually in a lot of ways the 80s, a lot of movies, the 70s and 80s is a lot more anti-science fiction. But there, of course, in the 50s there were the cautionary tales, Godzilla and stuff like that. Although Godzilla itself is also more complex than that. But you also, yeah, I mean, the 50s did have a lot of alien invaders and mutations and nuclear bombs gone awry and stuff like that. But you also had the pro science fiction as well. Them is a good example. Yes, them is, atomic horror, science will destroy us sort of thing. War Eagles was going to be like the island at the top of the world, but dinosaurs and Middle Earth eagles. Yes, I have heard about. Yeah, War Eagles was a Willis O'Brien project, if I remember correctly, but one of many that sadly he was not able to get off the ground. Um, yeah, it's really sad about Willis O'Brien. It's just long string of failed projects. It's really too bad that he never reached the same peak after King Kong. Because a lot of his ideas would have been worth seeing, I think. But this is what it is. Atomic Bomb brought the Beast 20,000 Fathoms to life. Yeah. Willis O'Brien was trying to get a sequel to King Kong made when we fought Frankenstein. Yes. King Kong versus Prometheus, or King Kong versus Frankenstein, or whatever name that ended up becoming King Kong versus Godzilla without either Willis O'Brien or Miriam C. Cooper's knowledge or approval. Yeah. I don't blame Toho for that. I blame John Beck for that. As far as Toho's concerned, I just look at this movie on the strength of the movie, which I'll actually, when I do at the end here, when I do some reveals of upcoming videos, you'll get to learn where exactly I place King Kong versus Godzilla and King Kong Escapes on the list of Godzilla movies, where they sit in my tier list for it. Went to C65. It was decent, except the dinosaurs were butt ugly. I can believe that. They're post Jurassic World dinosaurs, and Jurassic World entirely gave up on doing anything accurate for dinosaurs. So, when do we get a movie where the dinosaurs talk? Don't they talk in the Walking with Dinosaurs movie? I know they talk in Disney's Dinosaur, and I think Walking with Dinosaurs, the movie, they talk, or at least they have like sort of narrated voiceover or something like that. They did a Lone Ranger movie where Johnny Depp played Tonto. Yes, they did. I actually liked Lone Ranger. I thought the Lone Ranger was a good movie. Drug a bit in the middle, and the part where like the Native Americans come rushing in just to get slaughtered was a bit weird. Um, but overall, I liked the Lone Ranger. I thought it was actually a much more intelligent movie than it got credit for. It's just that to understand it fully and get the most out of it, you kind of need to have like a working knowledge of the genre of Western film and a knowledge of like the history of the West and how it was settled and colonized and how that was then represented in film and literature and so on. If you don't have that background, then I could see why you would think the Lone Ranger just looked like a bunch of dumb crap. But I liked it. I thought it was good. And at least that one, unlike John Carter, because Disney's Lone Ranger was sort of like this meta commentary on Western history and Western film, and kind of like a prequel to the Lone Ranger as a character, like the Lone Ranger radio show and the TV show and stuff like that. It's kind of like a prequel to those. It actually stands alone. So I mean, it would have been interesting to have more movies, but it's not like it doesn't feel like the story's left unfinished. Um, because the movie is just the lead into the Lone Ranger as a cultural icon. Um, so it still works perfectly fine on its own. Martin says, I made a meme that was 65, was a prequel to the 1993 Super Mario Brothers movie because some of the dinosaurs had a humanoid design. Sure, why not? Yeah, one of the best dinosaur movies ever is Super Mario Brothers, right? And it's a post-apocalyptic dinosaur movie where dinosaurs have taken over the Earth. You know what, Kaiser? That should be Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. That is Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, and that is one we could do a movie for as well. Xenozoic Tales, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, post-apocalyptic dinosaur movie with a lot of overtones of like climate change and environmental destruction. Like it works. It would totally work for having those themes and being just a cool action movie with Cadillacs and dinosaurs. So I don't know why nobody's thought of doing a Cadillacs and Dinosaurs movie, but that is one that, again, if you had competent writers and competent designers creating these dinosaurs and stuff, then it could be really good. It's just a question of if we trust Hollywood to do it well nowadays. John Beck cheated Willis O'Brien. Yes, he did. Land Before Time movies. Yeah. They should do a live action version of Land Before Time. I'm surprised they haven't yet, frankly. But then Land Before Time is not owned by Disney. If it was Disney, they would have done it by now. But it is not. Sad that Westerns aren't popular anymore. Yeah, Westerns are a hard sell. I mean, there's a certain extent to which, like, what more can you do with a Western? Like, what has not been done already with Westerns? Which is why I think you get, for those Westerns that do come out, a lot of them are either weird Westerns, like Cowboys and Aliens, or they are more like revisionist Westerns, like 310 to Yuma, stuff like that. Um, you don't see a lot of just straightforward Westerns, especially now that there's a lot more sensitivity around issues of, like, what the colonization of North America looked like and the effects of it on indigenous people. It's kind of hard to be like, cowboys are the good guys when, we're being sensitive, and rightly so, being sensitive to um, intergenerational traumas of indigenous people and stuff like that. But I mean, I do like a good costume western, uh, a good bad costume western. So, like, some of my favorite westerns are, well, Wild Wild West, Maverick, Tombstone. Those are some of my favorite westerns, because they're terrible. Lone Ranger, they're terrible, but they have fantastic costumes. Like, they look great, and Tombstone especially. Like, those mustaches, those frock coats. You kidding me? They look fantastic. That's what my character in Red Dead Online looks like, which is like the best western out there right now is the Red Dead franchise, which is video games. I remember Cadillacs and Dinosaurs had a cartoon. Yes, they did. In the 90s, there in the post Jurassic Park dinosaur fad, where there was lots of crappy dinosaur movies came out and lots of dinosaur cartoons, and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was one of those things picked up for a Saturday morning cartoon, back when Saturday mornings were still a thing. And it was great. That's actually how I got introduced to Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, was the cartoon. And then from there, I migrated on to comics, like the original comics by Mark Schultz, which are a lot more mature than the cartoon was. Um, but yeah, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs is it's a good time. That's one that is due for a remake. Except I don't think it was ever really. Sorry, excuse me. Um, I don't think it was actually that popular to begin with, really. Um, like, it's because I mean, virtually none of the dinosaur stuff that came out after Jurassic Park actually um, had the longevity and the lasting power of Jurassic Park. Um, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was one of those. Like, they tried out for a season, didn't really stick, didn't sell enough toys, I guess. I don't know, whatever. Um, but yeah, which is unfortunate because I like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. It's a lot of interesting concepts about nature and environmental themes and stuff like that that I think could actually still resonate today. Sad that westerns aren't popular anymore. Unforgiven was the last good western I remember. Yeah, yeah, Unforgiven. I think there's a good argument to be made. Unforgiven was the last, like, real western, um, which, as, like, sort of Clint Eastwood's own retrospective on westerns, it makes it interesting. Um, there have been westerns since Unforgiven. When did Unforgiven come out? It was when I was a teenager. I remember that. Um, Unforgiven, 1992 is when Unforgiven came out. So yes, there have been westerns since then, like Tombstone or Wild Wild West and stuff like that. But yeah, it's that was the last, like, sort of straightforward real western. Um, remember Cadillacs and Dinosaur. My all-time favorite western is The Wild Bunch. Sure. I wouldn't mind a dinosaur movie with a retro design if that was the art style. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do see attempts to do, because I like Victorian science fiction. I do see attempts to do, like, a Victorian Lost Worldy kind of story, but with modern understanding of dinosaurs. And it never quite looks right because mixing the Victorian stuff with modern interpretations of dinosaurs, it's like, you're used to seeing Victorian stuff and associating with like Victorian looking dinosaurs. I mean, that said, if I was doing if I was a producer, director, whatever, and I was doing a modern adaptation of The Lost World by Conan Doyle, I would do modern looking dinosaurs in it. Just because, to me, the paleontological accuracy trumps other concerns. Um, but I'm not a Hollywood producer, so. Um, but to see a movie with like deliberately retro designs would be kind of cool, especially if it was like a deliberately retro movie, like it was done even in the style of old movies, which nobody really does. Um, but like, if you had a movie like Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, which is a fantastic movie and I love it. So of course nobody liked it. Um, Sky Captain, if it had dinosaurs in it, they would have to look like retro dinosaurs. Like they would have to be the tail dragging T Rex and stuff like that, because that's what would look right for that movie. Because it is a very retro 30s sort of movie, right? So, but I don't think Sky Captain is an experiment. We're ever going to see that one experiment like that again. Um, very expensive to produce, and I mean really significant as far as the development of like digital sets and stuff like that. And also AI Laurence Olivier in it, which is now a controversial issue among the striking actors and writers. But yeah, I mean, Sky Captain was specifically made to appeal to me and like only me. So just got a western with Nicolas Cage called The Old Ways, but I haven't watched it yet. And Nicolas Cage western, eh? That would be something. Is it like a new Nicolas Cage movie or an old Nicolas Cage movie? Okay, give me a second. I have to blow my nose instead of constantly wiping it on myself. So just give me 1 second. I will be back momentarily. All right, there we go. Back. Okay. So you remember Prehistoria? Prehistoria or Prehysteria? I remember the Prehysteria movie. I don't know if that's one you're thinking of, Martin. His current actor strike is ridiculous. Well, I already got in trouble with some people in my comments when I posted my video where I used ChatGPT to outline a Mothra versus King Kong movie. Some people did not appreciate my doing that. Um, so, yes, I know it is a contentious issue, so maybe I won't express my full opinions on the actor strike right now. 2022 or 23? Okay. Huh. So I know Nicolas Cage is like in this weird place where he does a lot of these like crappy B movies because he just has a lot of debt he has to pay off. Um, they Left Behind. He was in Left Behind. Like what? Um, but then he gets these odd major roles like in Renfield, stuff like that, and he had a cameo there in The Flash. Um, so, but um, Nicolas Cage is definitely Nicolas Cage. There's no one quite like Nicolas Cage, regardless of the movie, regardless of his performance. You're in for Nicolas Cage, whatever you get. Let's not work so that the people who run Hollywood stay indifferent and rich. Yeah. E.T. ripoff about the little dinosaurs. Did you see Renfield? No, I did not see Renfield. Um, I I looked at it, thought, well, we'll see, and then the trailers were coming out, and it's just like, meh. My interest in it dropped off a cliff when I saw the first trailers for it. I don't know what I was expecting or hoping for. Um, because like they're not gonna make. It's not possible to make a movie that is like the original Universal monster movies anymore. Um, because if you did, it would be like Sky Captain, right? Like, um, that's one of the things that I liked about Sky Captain is that it is exactly like a movie they would have made in 1939 if they had CGI, right down to the acting, like that really affected acting, that affected sort of hyper realist style. Hyper realism not meaning realistic, but like more um, hyper realism means sort of more perfect than real, um, more hyper than real. Um, uh, it's hyperrealism is like what Main Street USA in Disneyland is compared to a real small town Main Street, right? That's hyperrealism is Main Street USA. So that hyperrealism is one of the major qualities of film from, I mean, definitely pre World War II, even arguably pre like 60s. And Sky Captain had that. Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow had that affected style, which a lot of people didn't like because they didn't understand it, because you have to know what that is doing. So you have to know that era of film to understand what Sky Captain was doing. Anyways, my point is, to do a proper Universal Monsters movie, you would have to do it in that style, and it would just be like a weird little direct-to-video project. That I would love to work on it, but yeah, it wouldn't be like a thing. So, which is then consequently why like every attempt to redo Universal Monsters has been terrible, because Hollywood doesn't, Universal specifically doesn't know what to do with it, because that style of movie isn't made anymore. So you just get like these action movies with it's a monster instead of a terrorist or something, or Renfield, which is like this weird superhero comedy thing. Um, so I passed on Renfield. Are you gonna watch the Last Voyage of the Demeter? Um, I've thought about it. I've what I've seen of it looks potentially interesting. Um, we'll see if I remember to go see it. My track record of even remembering movies are out is pretty sketchy as it is. Um, so we'll see. We'll see. Um, I mean, at least it looks like an actual horror movie instead of just an action movie. So that's more than you can say for The Mummy or Van Helsing or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll see Last Voyage of the Demeter. Prehysteria is what I'm referring to. Yeah, I don't. I haven't seen Prehysteria. I just sort of know of it. Um, Douglas says, I loved Sky Captain. Everything from The Shadow to Godzilla to the Flash Superman shorts, just lovely. Yes. Yeah, so many references in Sky Captain. And like you can tell that Kerry Conran, who the director for it, that he loves the material. He loves the era. He loves the media. Um, there's the one scene where you can see King Kong climbing the Empire State Building, like just all those little Easter eggs he throws in there. And they're not Easter eggs that detract from the story either. It's not like, hey, look at this thing. It's from this thing. It's like just if you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't. If you know it, it just adds that much more to it. And you're like, as you're watching, you're like, yes, me and this guy are on the same wavelength. Like he knows this stuff. He's one of us. He's a fan of this stuff. Um, yeah, freaking love Sky Captain. Thought I should watch that again. It's been a while since I've actually watched it. Nicolas Cage made a decent Dracula. Well, good. I mean, it's nice for Nicolas Cage that he finally did become a vampire, you know. So good for him. Finally, life dream. Renfield had some good moments. Yeah, cool. I'm sure it did. It was very ambitious, very retro. Yeah, it was. Um, and retro not just in that, oh, it's set in the 1930s. It's retro like it was made like a movie from the 30s. and acted like a movie from the 30s, written like a movie from the 30s. Though that said, I mean, one of the most profitable movies of all time was also done that way. Pirates of the Caribbean. If you listen to the first one, if you listen to the writer's audio commentary, they talk about how they wrote it as though it was a swashbuckler movie from the 30s, written under the studio system, and how like Orlando Bloom was their big like Errol Flynn type actor, and Pintel and Rigetti and the two Navy guys were like their comedy duos, like Abbott and Costello, doing a routine, stuff like that. Um, but even though Pirates was written in a very 30s sort of style, it was not acted or shot in a very 30s style. Um, Sky Captain was, which makes it awesome. um, that's what makes it amazing. Well, we've been talking about everything all over the place, and not so much about dinosaurs. I've noticed. Director Sky Captain should have remade Buck Rogers. He would have been perfect for doing Buck Rogers. Kerry Conran would have done an amazing job at Buck Rogers, but he has not been entrusted with any movies since Sky Captain. And I mean, I get it. Um, he would have been the perfect person to bring back all these 30s franchises, but nobody likes 30s franchises except me. So, so that is just a pipe dream there. But in the alternate one of those alternate universes out there in the multiverse, there is a universe where Sky Captain was a huge success and everyone loved it, and Kerry Conran went on to a magnificent career doing all of these Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and The Shadow and all of these sorts of movies. Random question here. Do you know where to comparison to Dinosaurs and Dragons came from? Oh, I don't know who was the first person to come up with that idea. I have my doubts that um, there actually is any kind of real connection between dinosaur, like fossils, and dragons. Um, I mean, arguably, like, okay, you know, in China, they're digging up bones of dinosaurs and all these are dragon bones. Okay. I can see some of that argument. There is a famous woolly rhinoceros skull in Germany that was thought to be the head of a dragon. I forget the name of it right now, but it's like the Worm, something Worm. Um, so there are some of those connections there. Um, but I take the approach, generally speaking, that mythology is important for like moral and spiritual reasons and cultural reasons. They're not just pre-scientific attempts to explain things. So I would think that like dragon myths came first. People told these myths about these fantastic creatures who were sort of tied elementally to the universe, and in many cases represent sort of like powers of nature, kind of like Mothra does, right? Um, and then they found these fossils and were like, oh, cool, these must be the bones of those things that we tell stories about. Like I would imagine that was more the order. Then they saw fossils and were like, what are these things? Well, let's call them dragons and whatever. I don't believe that religions and mythologies and things like that are just pre-scientific attempts to explain the universe. I think they are much deeper and they're much different from those sorts of questions. The idea that, oh, religions and mythologies just reduced down to pre-scientific attempts to explain the universe is a modern reductionist invention. So, oh, dragons are dinosaurs. That it's probably a fairly modern invention, I would imagine, like post-enlightenment kind of thing. But I'm much more complimentary towards like religions and mythologies and stuff like that, because I mean I am religious. I don't haven't talked about it on video very much, but I mean I am a Christian. Um, I have a degree in theology, and I taught for like 25 years in the museum and heritage field. So And I've been to Japan and stayed in temples in Japan and stuff like that. And I've studied religions and I've dated people of all sorts of different religions. So I find religion a very interesting subject. And I don't think it, and I also like science and religion, because it is possible. Um, I don't think it reduces down neatly to, oh, religion's just proto-science. It's like saying the United Kingdom is just proto-America. Like, it's not. It's not how that works. Dragons turn up in every culture. They even mention the King James Version of the Bible. King James Version also has unicorns in it, which is fun. Mentioned 9 times, I think. It's a translation error. Lindeworm, yes, that's it. Thank you, Douglas. The Lindeworm is that rolling rhinoceros skull. Big fan of dragons. Also, I heard a theory of the massive nasal cavity in mammoths led to the Cyclops myth. I've heard that. I don't know if I believe that. Um, Again, because I'm not automatically given to trying to find a pseudoscientific explanation for mythology. Like, oh, what's a Cyclops referring to? Him? So he's some kind of proto-science thing, right? Like, no, I don't think that. I think if there is any relation, it's they came up with Cyclops first and then found mammoth skulls and were like, oh, well, maybe this is the Cyclops skull. Um, so, yeah. Dinosaur bones probably inspired stories about the Titans and Nephilim. Well, I don't know about that. Actually, the Nephilim. I'll tell you what the Nephilim are. So, a lot of Genesis is a reaction against the cultures that surrounded the Hebrew people. None of the Bible was written prior to the Jewish captivity in Babylon. So, in like the 500s BCE, the Hebrew people, particularly the cultural elites in Jerusalem, Israel was conquered by the Neo-Assyrian Empire in Babylon, the Babylonian Empire. The elites in Jerusalem were carted away off to Babylon to be slaves. And none of the Bible was written before that. A lot of the stories in the Old Testament do predate it, but none of it was written down before that. And a lot of what is written down then becomes a reaction against the culture of the Babylonians, the culture of the slave, the people who've enslaved the Hebrews. So, like the both creation stories in Genesis. Genesis has 2 creation stories in it. The first one is the 6 days. The second one is the Garden of Eden. They contrast very sharply with the creation stories of the Babylonians and other people of the Middle East, in very significant ways. Which, if you ask, I can get into that more. The Nephilim are the Hebrew take on the ancient heroes, the demigod heroes, right? So you think of like Hercules, right? Now we're not talking specifically about Hercules, but Hercules is one of a genre of these sort of demigod heroes, these heroic figures, these warrior figures who are part man, part god. The Nephilim in Genesis are like angels that have come down to earth and mated with humans. And in so doing, they have broken these partitions in reality that keep reality organized. Right? You think of like the 6 days of creation, right? It's the separation of things, right? Separating day from night, separating sky from sea, separating land from sea, and so on. So the order of creation is the separation of these things. And then these angels, these renegade angels, come in and they mate with humans and create these offspring called the Nephilim. And that is a disruption of the natural order, right? It's disruption, it's breaking these separations between things. It's the divine and the human coming together in a corrupted way. Like, this changes later on, right? Because Jesus is God and man, but that's a whole other thing. The humans and angels meeting in a carnal way come together, produce these heroes of mythology, which the Hebrews say actually they're assholes and abominations. These are horrible, abominable things, and they're jerks. Screw them. And the existence of the Nephilim is actually the proximate cause of the flood. The flood is largely a result of the Nephilim existing. because once the Nephilim exist, they've broken the separations. Well, what comes next? Well, it's the separation of the entire cosmic order, right? That separation between sky and water, between land and water, that all breaks down. That's what the flood is. So um, that's what the Nephilim are. Now, um, whether people then saw bones of like dinosaurs and prehistoric mammals and thought, oh, those are Nephilim bones. I mean, maybe, I don't know. But that's not the order of events. The order of events is that the Nephilim are a response to the demigod myths of the other people of the Middle East that the Hebrews are reacting against, because the other people of the Middle East are the ones constantly invading and attacking the Hebrews and enslaving them. So it's actually like a class critique of um, of the people who conquered them. A lot of ancient legends overlap. I'll get to your question, Ashley. But Queen says, a lot of ancient legends overlap. Even some of the characters are similar, like Hercules and Samson. Yeah, yeah. Well, Samson's different. Samson's not a demigod. Samson is, he's a Nazarite. So being a Nazarite was a vow that your parents would make to consecrate their child, consecrate you to God. And that came with a certain lifestyle. And the idea being that if you're Nazarite, you have certain blessings from God because you've lived this very dedicated way of life. And part of that is not cutting your hair. And that's where Samson got in trouble, is that he broke his Nazarite vows with Delilah, and she cut his hair, and he lost his strength. But when he was humbled, and he's like strapped up there between the pillars of this temple, and he humbles himself. So it was his lack of humility that led to his losing his power. He humbles himself, and that's when God blesses him with the strength again to destroy the temple and crush all of the Philistines. So I can see where you think like, oh, they're both really strong guys, right? But the story is very different between the two of them. Queen says, so fascinating. Oh, thank you. Both Hercules and Samson killed a lion with their bare hands. Greek god Eros also made it with humans. Yeah. Eros was a winged man. Yeah. Ashley says, what is something that gets you super excited about dinosaurs or movies these days? Well, the thing that is exciting me the most with paleontology right now is all the learning that I am doing about the Cambrian period and the Rocky Mountains. So, because I've been doing all these tours in the Rockies, leading tour groups to the Burgess Shale and so on. Area, not to the shale itself. I've been doing these tours through the Rocky Mountains and learning about, in much more fine detail than I ever did before, about different sites, different formations, different layers of rock in the mountains and how they formed and why the Burgess Shale is where it is and things like that. So learning about it in more and more fine detail and then being able to share that with other people, that's what's getting me excited lately. I'm also waiting with bated breath for my life-size Anomalocaris model to arrive, finally, someday, hopefully, maybe, while I can still use it. But I am looking forward to that, getting that one. So that's something that's exciting me about prehistoric life and paleontology lately. Martin, do you get annoyed that people think that dinosaurs like Stegosaurus had 2 brains? Like what Charlie Day's Newt says, Pacific Rim. Oh god, Pacific Rim. Not saying the negative about Pacific Rim because I love that film. Well, then I will try not to say anything negative about Pacific Rim. I did not enjoy it myself. I mean, there's like a 40-year delay in scientific information about like what scientists know versus what filters down to the general public, right? So maybe it'd be nice if it was at least even if it was only a 10-year delay or a 20-year delay, that'd be something. But it's like a 40-year delay. Like general conception of dinosaurs is just catching up to Jurassic Park, let alone like what we actually know about dinosaurs now. People still think velociraptors look like they do in Jurassic Park, when we know they're a lot different than that. But they do look more like a big turkey, so the kid was right in Jurassic Park. So, I mean, it's just that lack of knowledge that gets out there and what the public sort of thinks they know about dinosaurs. Just is what it is. In 40 years, they'll catch up and know that Stegosaurus did not have 2 brains. There are numerous flood myths in many cultures as well. Yes, there are, Kaiser. That's another example. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's the flood story in that, and there are direct parallels between that and the flood story in Genesis. But the flood story in Genesis changes those details on purpose as a critique of the original mythology and the culture that spawned, and to share their own worldview as well. So the Hebrews are like taking these myths from other cultures, but they're transforming them to share their own view of the world that is radically different from those of the cultures that surround them. I mean, just to give you an idea of how radically different it is, science would not exist if not for Abrahamic religion, because there are worldviews inherent to Abrahamic religions, which is why science developed in Europe and the Middle East and not anywhere else. Also, the Hebrews, one of the things that made them different from every other culture around them is that the Hebrews were the people who did not sacrifice children. That is one of the things that made the Hebrews different from everyone else around them, just as much as circumcision. So those are some little tidbits of information for you there. Dinosaurs were supposed to have feathers. At least that's what some paleontologists say now. Yes. Small carnivorous dinosaurs absolutely had feathers. Like, no question about that. There is a question about whether bigger ones did. And there was a study a few years ago when everybody got carried away with putting feathers on everything, like this T-Rex toy. Somebody actually did a systematic study of like every single scrap of like T-Rex skin that we have preserved and found no evidence for feathers on adult T-Rex. Baby T-Rexes probably did. They probably had like a downy feather coat to keep them warm. But a full-grown adult T-Rex had no need for feathers. They had like gigantothermia on their side. When you're this big, you're generating your own heat at this point. So this toy, as cool as it is, as much as I love the pose and how dynamic this toy is from Safari, the feathers are not accurate on it. T-Rex did not have feathers. For plant-eating dinosaurs, stand up. All right. For plant-eating dinosaurs, they might have had some kind of integument. We know that ceratopsians had like quill sort of integument on them. So almost think of like feathers, but without the feathery part, just the quill, like that. We know that ceratopsians had that. I don't think we know about hadrosaurs, but there hasn't been evidence so far of hadrosaur skin that has any evidence of feathers on it. So that's up in the air, but I think as a general rule, the bigger the dinosaur, the less likely it is to have feathers, because why would it need them? But smaller dinosaurs, especially small carnivorous dinosaurs that are directly related to birds, like the dromaeosaurs, the raptors, yeah, they had feathers for sure. Pacific Rim had great monsters. I will grant that Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim does have the best Hollywood giant monster designs. There are some terrible giant monster designs coming out of Hollywood. Cloverfield is a terrible design. Most of the monsters in the Monsterverse are terrible designs. But Pacific Rim at least had good designs. I will grant it that. So the sequel to Pacific Rim was so forgettable? Is Atlantis a flood myth? Atlantis is a philosophical thought experiment. So Atlantis was invented by Plato. The point of the story is that Plato is trying to articulate his ideal society. And so he invents an ancient Athens that is like run the way he thinks a society should be run. So if you read like Plato's Republic, it's this sort of like this society ruled over by these philosopher kings, these enlightened, caste of intellectual guys running society. Right? The smartest people should run society, right? And he wanted to articulate the virtues of his hypothetical ancient Athens by contrasting it against the vices of this other ancient hypothetical invented society called Atlantis. And so Atlantis fights a war with ancient Athens, and ancient Athens wins in Plato. And then Atlantis is punished with destruction. because of its vice and its how the society functions or doesn't function, according to Plato. And then this cataclysm actually takes both Atlantis and this ancient Athens that Plato invents. Plato invented Atlantis. That's all it is. It's a thought experiment. It's a philosophical thought experiment. That's what Atlantis is. It's where the Tarchon is being swallowed into the sea. Can you imagine a dinosaur look like Big Bird? Those are Therizinosaurs. They're the ones that look like Big Bird. Do you enjoy fantasy Ray Harryhausen movies on Greek and Arabic myths like Seventh Voyage and Jason the Argonauts? I went through a pretty big sword and sandals phase. Like when was that? Like 20 years-ish ago, 15 years ago. No, what year is it? I keep forgetting. Like, how long ago were things? But yeah, like 20 years ago, I went through the sword and sandals phase where I watched like all those things. And actually, I love the biblical, like the sword and sandals biblical movies from like the 50s, where they were like in the ancient Middle East and all the women look totally glamorous with mascara and lipstick and stuff. I love those movies. Jason the Argonauts I really liked. Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, don't remember it well enough to remember if I really liked it or not. I did like the Sinbad ride at Tokyo Disney Sea, but it's been a long time since I've seen Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. But Jason the Argonauts, I remember liking that. And I mean, the monsters in it are amazing. Like Talos, the giant statue that starts moving around, that's awesome. The harpies, the skeletons are so unnerving. Like they pop up and they start kind of like slowly shambling, and then suddenly they just burst into screaming and stuff. So Jason the Argonauts is great. Watch the sitcom Dinosaurs. Yeah, I watched it. I wasn't like in love with it. I watched episodes that were on TV when I was a teenager. Clash of the Titans, one of my favorite Ray Harryhausen films. Yeah. Avoid the remake Clash of the Titans at all costs. Okay, duly noted. Walter, the artwork of Charles Knight, his concept of dynamic dinos, two small theropods leaping at another back into the ground, spot on. Ray Harryhausen dynamic dinos are always great. Yeah, Knight was ahead of his time as well. So far advanced that like nobody was ready for it, and yeah, like his Dryptosaurs attacking each other is like amazing. And his prehistoric mammal art, like his Ice Age art, is still like super accurate because Knight was originally a wildlife artist, so he had that extensive background in painting living animals, and he brought that to his prehistoric art, which is why he would paint them like so dynamic. And his Ice Age art is still pretty accurate. In fact, I use some of it in my book. I got permission from Knight's. I remember her relationship. It's like granddaughter or grandniece, one of the two. But I got her permission to use some of his art in my book because it's just great. It's great art, and I wanted to use it. Atlantis isn't really an ancient alien civilization. Alas, no. I'm sorry, Queen. It is not. Atlantis is a philosophical thought experiment. But, I find it interesting that, Plato invents Atlantis as a thought experiment in like the worst kind of society. Like Atlantis is like not what you would want to live in. Atlantis is his thought experiment of like a totally corrupt and like vile society. And ever since, we've been trying to resurrect it, right? We've been looking for Atlantis. We wanted to reclaim the knowledge of Atlantis, the technology of Atlantis. We want to rescue Atlantis, right? We want to redeem Atlantis. And why is that? Oh, because we're Atlantis. We're a corrupt, technologically sophisticated but morally corrupt society, right? So we're the society that Plato was like, don't be like that. And so, of course, we want to find Atlantis and redeem Atlantis, right? Because we see ourselves in Atlantis. Ten Commandments is actually a worthwhile film. Yeah. And actually, the 1923 version of Ten Commandments is fantastic. I love the 1923 version of it. The first third is the story of the Exodus with Moses and the Ten Commandments. Then the latter 2/3 is like a modern morality story. It's a little bit preachy, but as you know, it's the Ten Commandments. It's a little preachy, you think? Um, but the 1923 version, is so good. And it's by, it's by Cecil B. DeMille as well. So he actually remade his own movie, which is interesting. Taking Mexico special effects, yeah. Mascara was probably from Egypt. Yeah, they did have like charcoal or whatever they used, blackening agent to black around the eyes. Yeah. So are the sword and sandals ones with the ladies in mascara really wrong? I like those sand and sandal films as well. The Ten Commandments was amazing. That film had to contend with Moby Dick and Forbidden Planet. Yeah, that's not a bad year, 1956. Eh? Charles Knight inspires so many people. Yeah. Sound design for Tails was amazing. That creaky metal screech still gives me chills. Yeah, definitely. Jason the Argonaut still holds up. Cecil B. DeMille made a lot of religious epics. Yeah, he did. He also made one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Northwest Mounted Police is Cecil B. DeMille's take on the history of the mounted police and the Northwest Rebellion here in Canada. And it is terrible. It is awful. And I don't know if I'm saying that, if I can divorce that from being Canadian and seeing how he misrepresents my country's history. But his religious epics are a lot better, certainly. Like his version of Samson and Delilah. Yeah. The Robe is a really good movie. The Robe and the book that it's based on. The book is fantastic. The Robe by Lloyd C. Douglas is an amazing book. And The Robe, the movie, with Richard Burton and Victor Mature, is also really good. The sequel, Demetrius and the Gladiators, is meh. It's okay. It's if you like sword and sandals movies. But The Robe is a good one. So now we've got from dinosaurs to biblical movies. That's just quite the winding live stream here. What time is it? 8:48. What's the worst movie ever made about dinosaurs? Oh my god. The worst movie? Probably something by Asylum. I mean, there's so many contenders for worst dinosaur movie. You almost have to partition it by era, by budget. I mean, the worst dinosaur movie, the worst like Hollywood big budget dinosaur movies in recent memory are Jurassic World. I did not care for the Jurassic World movies very much. I mean, the dinosaurs were dinosaurs, movie monster dinosaurs, whatever. But like Fallen Kingdom, where they require you to forget the previous movie to make this movie work. Like, oh, Blue is like so smart, she's got such a bond with Owen. It's like she tried to kill Owen repeatedly in the last movie. And just some like dumb stuff like, oh, we have this genetically engineered dinosaur, you sick it on somebody, on a target, by pointing a laser pointer at them. It's like, why don't you just use you have a gun-shaped object with a laser pointer, why don't you just use that? But I guess guns don't exist in Jurassic World. So Asylum movies, I mean, all those movies that you find direct to video in the bargain bin at Walmart are going to be worse movies. Like terrible dinosaur movies. Arguably any movie with reptiles and frills, it's bad dinosaurs. Whether or not it's a good movie is a separate thing. So like Journey to the Center of the Earth with James Mason is a great movie. It's just the dinosaurs in it are terrible because they're not really dinosaurs. They're just reptiles with frills pasted on them. Yeah, I don't know. Like, there's all the made up dinosaurs, like King Kong 2005 is just made up dinosaurs. Because, you can copyright the made up ones, right? Asylum makes the worst movies anywhere. Yeah. I don't know what your opinion on the series Primal, but I think it's awesome. You probably won't like it because it's pretty graphic. I have not seen Primal. I've heard about it, and it's by Genndy Tartakovsky, which he does good stuff. I mean, I've liked his cartoons in the past. I just haven't had the wherewithal to sit down and try and find it and watch it. But I have nothing against it. I wouldn't mind seeing it at some point. Um, and the fact that it's like a very consciously retro, like yeah, it's cavemen and dinosaurs. Deal with it. Like, I can appreciate the very intentional retro aspect of it. So I'm not disinterested in seeing it. I just haven't got around to seeing it yet. Like the scene where someone outraced a dinosaur on a motorcycle. That's Jurassic World, I assume. Um, I always felt sorry for the reptiles in those old dinosaur films. Yeah. Well, like the original 1 million BC, so the one from the 40s, where that footage has been reused in a million movies of the two reptiles attacking each other, the tegu lizard and the baby crocodile, and like it's so vicious to watch. Like these reptiles going at it, and then they both like get thrown off of like a set anyways, and it's just like I can't imagine those reptiles survived the filming, which is sad, and that is why we have regulations on the use of animals in film, is because of like old dinosaur movies, and also the treatment of horses in old movies as well. um, but like yeah, you're not allowed to just wantonly murder animals for your movie. Especially when you have them fight each other and kill each other in this movie. Um, yeah. I'm old enough to remember which films featured Slurposauruses, lizards and alligators with prosthetics glued onto them. Awful movies, yeah. Um, Actually, one of the worst dinosaur movies that I like the least is the 1960 version of The Lost World. I love the 1925 version. I love the novel Lost World. The 1960 version is trash. And a large part of the trash is that it is Slurposauruses. It is reptiles with frills pasted on, who are then made to fight each other. That's one of the reasons why it's trash. So other reasons why it's trash too. But yeah, the 1960 version of Lost World is awful, and that's part of the reason why. They used to make them fight. Yeah. Most people in Jurassic Park movies can outrun a dinosaur. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean, Jurassic Park's Jurassic Park. The first movie's great. The second movie I actually enjoyed. Everything after that is like sketchy. Um, at least in the first two movies, the dinosaurs were a credible threat, and you had people in situations where they had limited resources to deal with it. In Jurassic World, every situation could have been solved by a gun or by proper animal handling protocols that are used in zoos today. If they used proper animal handling protocols, the Indominus Rex never would have got out to begin with. So that makes it hard to watch because so much of Jurassic World relies on people being stupid. And for excuse me again. Sorry, I gotta blow my nose again. Um, Ugh, there's like something in the air, make me stuffy. Um, yeah, the Jurassic World requires people being stupid, not having guns, and that's just like I can't get behind a movie that requires people to be stupid and then requires the audience to be too stupid to notice it. Um, but Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World Jurassic Park, are fine. They're great because Spielberg knows what he's doing, and Spielberg knows how to direct a movie, and Spielberg knows how people behave in real life, which a lot of directors don't apparently. What about The Lost Continent? Not the Hammer film, which is a ripoff of The Lost World. It's been forever since I've seen Lost Continent. I keep getting it mixed up with other movies like The Land Unknown, which I actually watched today at the store while I was in. I was at my monster store today. I was just watching dinosaur movies to prep for tonight. Um, so I watched The Land Unknown. Lost Continent, I've not seen that one in a long time. So I don't actually have an opinion on it right now because it's been so long since I've seen it. The Lost World 6 made by Irwin Allen. He also made The Towering Inferno and The Poseidon Adventure. Yeah, he should have stuck to disaster movies because The Lost World itself was a disaster. I used to read Star Spangled War stories. Those comics featured U.S. military personnel battling dinosaurs and marine reptiles on land and offshore of the Lost Islands of the Pacific during World War II. Yes. They also used that in a DC animated movie. That one that's set in the Golden Age with like the Justice Society, and it's set during World War II. Weird War Stories is the comic as well. Weird War Stories, and I can't remember the name of it. New Frontier, I think it is. The DC animated movie has that island with the dinosaurs on it, and that's in that story, or in that movie. Might be in the minority, but I think JP3 was a little better than JP2. Well, that's fine. You're entitled to think that. What I liked about Jurassic Park 2 is that it explored the ideas more. So, like, okay, Jurassic Park is like, should we or shouldn't we do genetic engineering? Jurassic Park 2 is like, well, we have genetic engineering. Now what? And so I thought questions like, does a genetically engineered animal have natural rights? As more engaging questions. I like that it fleshed out and explored more parts of the Jurassic Parkness. Like that world, that universe. And I like the themes of family. So Jurassic Park 2 has this overarching theme of family in it. Right? It presents the dinosaurs as family animals. There's a lot of baby dinosaurs in it. You see a lot of family structure. You see the T-Rex at the end, right? They're chasing after the baby. And it's reflected in the family dynamics with Malcolm and his daughter and Sarah and all of them. So it's got those family themes in it, which I think are interesting. And better than Jurassic World, because Jurassic World is just like, oh, look, they're movie monsters, which is like Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 2, especially, did so much to try and establish dinosaurs as like animals. Like they're actual animals. They're not just movie monsters. And then Jurassic World comes along and just makes them movie monsters. So that's something I don't like about Jurassic World. But Jurassic Park 3, I mean, I don't think Jurassic Park 3 deserves all of the hate that it gets. It's serviceable as a Jurassic Park movie. I don't think it really added a whole lot. So I don't know. But I mean, I'm not gonna crap on somebody who likes it. Like, great if you like it. That's good. Irwin Allen also did TV shows like Lost in Space and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Wasn't Lost Continent a Hammer film? I think so. I have to look that up. Are you going to show your fossil collection? I can! I've been waiting for somebody to ask. So, I'll go through the last questions here and then we'll look at some fossils maybe. Read War Tales to make a great movie? Yes, it would. Soldiers versus Dinosaurs? Yes. Actually, New Frontier? Yes. Gorgeous art, great retelling of the Golden Age heroes? Yeah. Walter says, fighting Triceratops and Lost Continent were also in Twilight Zone episode. It's a good day. Anthony made TV with his mind with those dinosaurs fighting. Yes. That reminds me, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, where the soldiers fight Godzillasaurus. Yeah, the Heisei one. Yeah. All right. Fossils, and Ashley says, ooh, fossils. Which ones do you think you would recognize the living animals if you were Professor Challenger? Well, crinoids I know for sure, because I have seen real-life crinoids. So crinoids are sea lilies. They are echinoderms, so they look like flowers, but they're not actually flowers. They're animals related to sea urchins and starfish. They have these stems that connect to the reef. They have a body, and they have these flowery petals that are actually arms that grab food out of the water and bring it down to their mouth, to the middle of their body. And I'm used to seeing them as fossils, but yeah. So like right here, we can see here. I'm gonna turn on my light. Boom! Oh, there. Oh, good lord! Ouch. Okay. There we go. Now the white balance is totally messed up, so now you can't see this for a different reason. Okay, so I don't know if you can actually see that. Let's focus on it a little bit more here. There we go. So like these round things in here, all these round circular things, those are the stems of crinoids, and then this up at the top over here, if I can, how can I get this so it's visible? By turning that off, I think. That is not helping. It's just washing everything out. This thing up here is the body of a crinoid. Yeah, you can't, it's hard to see in here. There we go. That's sort of like a cup-shaped thing. I've seen those at the Vancouver Aquarium. They're still around. And it blew my mind so much that I actually, I wanted to get a closer look, so I'd only see them as fossils. And I banged my head into the glass, because I forgot it's an aquarium, there's glass in the way. So, smack, bang. Yeah. So those invertebrates, because we have the exterior shell of them. So the crinoids, the bryozoans, the brachiopods, I would recognize all those. Dinosaurs, I actually think that most people, even experts, would have a hard time identifying the dinosaurs for real if we saw them. Because for a lot of them, we don't really know what their soft tissues were like. We have skin impressions, and sometimes we get the mummified ones and stuff like that. But I think it would be a lot more challenging for people to recognize the dinosaurs if we were to go back in time. Just because we're kind of we're making educated inferences about what they look like based on the evidence that we have. But it doesn't mean we know for sure what they look like. So if you went back in time, it'd be like, okay, I think that's a T-Rex. I don't know anything else in this environment that's big that would look like that. That's probably a Montosaurus because we have the mummified ones. I guess that's this ceratopsian, stuff like that. Ice Age animals, no problem because they look modern enough that we would recognize. Oh, that looks like a lion, but it's got gigantic teeth. It's probably a saber tooth. And mammoths. I mean, we have reconstructed mammoths from mammoth body parts and soft tissues and stuff. So, yeah. But the dinosaurs, I think, would actually be a lot harder than people realize, or we would expect them to be, because, we're just making the best educated inferences that we can about what they looked like, and the reality is probably going to be a lot weirder than we expected. So many beautiful creatures in the sea, yes, and here I collect them all in the rocks as fossils. Crinoid sounds like aliens for Doctor Who episode. Yeah. Well, it's CRINOID. But yeah, I guess Doctor Who versus the crinoids. We have to stop the crinoids before they destroy London. That would be hilarious. But I'm imagining Doctor Who fighting like giant crinoids. That said, though, the Elder Things from H.P. Lovecraft, so the ones that built the city in the Mountains of Madness, they're basically a kind of dramatic life forms, right? Like they have starfish heads and stuff, right? So I've actually drawn the Elder Things inspired by echinoderms to try and make them look like just if echinoderms had evolved into an intelligent life form, what they might look like. Me, oh look, a Hadrosaurus dinosaur. My name is Daryl. Yes, Daryl. Hello, Daryl. But yeah. I think a lot of it, if we went back in time, would be contextual. Like it's, okay, there's this giant, okay, we're 65 million years ago in Alberta, and there's this giant meat-eating dinosaur. It's probably a T-Rex. Like, that would probably be a lot more of it. It would just be contextual, based on what we do know about what lived there at that time. Interdimensional jellyfish. Yeah. Well, I've been playing a lot of Star Trek Online lately, and one of my favorite places to go is Space Station K-13, where they have those big jellyfish from the first episode of Next Generation. They're floating around in space around this planet and around the space station, K-13. So, they look kind of cool. Draw it. The crinoids attacking London. Maybe I will. Maybe I will draw Doctor Who versus the crinoids. The crinoids marching down the bridge there in front of the Big Ben, House of Commons. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what fossils I've shown you guys last as well. So I have collected some new things. I'm just trying to remember when. Um, One of my most recent things is this, actually. So this is a fossil stromatolite. So this is a colony of cyanobacteria. See, cyanobacteria, they make these sort of little mats, these colonies, and then sediment gets deposited on top. They grow another layer, more sediment, another layer, more sediment, another layer. So you get these like these layered guys here, and form these mounds that look kind of like these layered cabbagey sort of things. And this stromatolite fossil comes from outside of Waterton Glacier International Peace Park. Um, so this guy is about 1.5 billion years old. And these are the same stromatolites you find inside the parks. I just found a good spot along the river coming out of the parks where you can go. And once you're outside the parks, it's legal. So collected it from those rivers leading out of the parks. I'm not going to tell exactly where I collected it from to broadcast that to the world, but it is. I only collect legally. I don't collect inside parks and protected lands because I'm not a criminal. But so this is one of my more recent finds. Is this stromatolite here, 1.5 billion years old. And then on that same excursion, I found these ripples as well. So this you can see a lot better. So these are actually a little bit older, I think, than the stromatolite is. This might be like 1.6, 1.7 billion years old. Billion with a B. But yeah, just these nice ripples, which you also see a lot inside Waterton Glacier International Peace Park. This, again, was collected outside the park. Actually, this was part of road ballast that I found. But they took local rock and, used it as ballast. And like, oh, isn't that handy? Look at these nice ripples here. I think it's better off in my home than as ballast. Yeah. So, and then the green, it's in this area. There's these green layers and red layers. Both of them have ripples, but they're slightly different environments. So this is a wetter environment, an oxygen reducing environment, compared to the red rocks, which are a oxidizing environment. So the red is from the rust. But yeah. Anyways, those are some of my most recent sort of fossil finds here. I'm not sure what else may or may not be new, or at least stuff I haven't shown you yet. I'm reading a book which the Start Artillerymen series, 18th century American soldiers getting transported to a parallel dimension where dinosaurs never went extinct. Ooh, that sounds exciting. There's that theme park in, I think it's Virginia, where it's like dinosaurs versus Civil War soldiers. That, like, if I ever end up in that area for whatever reason, I don't imagine I ever will, but if I ever do end up in that region, I want to check that park out. Is the dinosaurs versus Civil War soldiers. Any thoughts about the Loch Ness Monster and other creatures sighted in lakes and other bodies of water? Yeah, I have thoughts about them. I like the idea of monsters. I like the monsters as cultural icons. So I love Loch Ness Monster. I love Bigfoot. I love jackalopes. Jackalope. I like the lake monsters. Here in Canada, in my neck of the woods, there's the Sasquatch, Bigfoot. There's also Ogopogo, who is the lake monster that is said to live in Lake Okanagan in the interior of British Columbia. As a kid, my family would go out to Lake Okanagan in the summers, and I would very intently be looking for that lake monster. So I love the idea of them. I love the culture around them. I love them as cultural icons. I just wish they actually existed, is all. Lake Okanagan in the interior of British Columbia is only 9,000 years old. It's a glacial lake. In fact, I wrote about it in my book. I have a whole chapter in there about whether or not Bigfoot and Ogopogo exist. Because there's a lot of light shed on the subject by paleontology. And Lake Okanagan is only 9,000 years old. So it is not old enough to have a prehistoric lake monster in it. If there is anything in it, it's probably just uh, like mammals, like otters or something like that. They're just frolicking around and get misidentified. Most of the videos, when you go online and look like Ogopogo videos, it's just waves. Like it's just like some boat passed by, now there's a wake, and there's just like these undulating waves, and the person taping it doesn't know what a wave looks like, which you'd think is ridiculous, but no. Like people don't spend as much time in nature anymore, and so they just don't know what things look like. They don't know what waves look like, which sounds ridiculous, but it's true. So yeah, I mean, like every Loch Ness monster photo and sighting has been accounted for as like some kind of hoax or mistake or whatever. So I'd like it if they existed. I think it'd be cool if they did, but I don't think they actually do. However, I am willing to change my mind if somebody like hauls out the carcass of a Bigfoot. Then okay, great, that's evidence, right? So I'm not going to say like never say never. It's just it depends on the evidence. So bring me like actual physical evidence of the carcass of a Loch Ness monster or the carcass of a Bigfoot, and I will believe it because there's the evidence. Um, but for what we know so far, I'm very skeptical about lake monsters in particular, because most of the lakes that they're said to occupy are all glacial lakes that didn't exist prior to a couple thousand years ago. Which sucks. But again, I love Ogopogo. Like I have Ogopogo stuff. Like I collect Ogopogo stuff whenever I end up, going into that neck of the woods or whatever. But yeah. Someone found the body of a plesiosaur and even took photos. I think I know what you're talking about. The sort of plesiosaur-looking body pulled out of the ocean. It's actually a basking shark. When sharks decay, they decay in a way that looks weirdly like plesiosaurs, um, because of the cartilaginous skeleton, just the way it actually looks inside. Um, the basking sharks tend to be mistaken for that kind of thing a lot. Once saw dino footprints on the edge of the Connecticut River in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Cool. What about Chupacabra? Everything I've seen about Chupacabra um, says that it's probably like black bears with mange, stuff like that. So bears with like a skin condition, because bears look weird underneath their fur. Like they're all like bears are actually surprisingly like skinny and lanky underneath their fur. But they don't. They look kind of like dogs, but they're not dogs. So they kind of look like weird and alien. And if they got mange, then like their skin looks all rough, and that might have just like a few weird tufts of hair left. Um, but then I mean, I don't know the cultural history of Chupacabra, so I'm not sure if it's like a mythology that has deeper roots than just like, oh, it's a black bear with mange. Did you hear the report that Tyrannosaurus was perhaps 70% bigger than previously thought? I don't think I have heard that one. Maybe, sure, I don't know. I'd have to look at the evidence. Do you think the Patterson film proves this is a Bigfoot? No. The Patterson film is very definitely a hoax. Um, it's guys in a costume horsing around filming it. I think the arguments that it's not a hoax are sketchy. I think it's pretty obviously a hoax, personally. Um, I once read a story about a Spanish knight who battled a large horned monster. The rest of the account, I thought, said monster might have been a description of a Triceratops. The problem with that is, okay, so it's been, a millennia since the Middle Ages, with knights in shining armor doing their thing. Dude fought one Triceratops. We've never found any Triceratops since. Where's the population of them to sustain, a population of Triceratops, right? So, that's another thing with a lot of these one-off stories. And I hate to be like breaking hearts with this and being like science skeptic guy. Um, but like, oh, there's this one dinosaur living in Africa in this lake. Oh, there's this one Triceratops in Spain. It's like, well, no animal survives with just one individual. right? Where's the population? You need a certain population density in order for a population to survive. So it's like, so I see it with Godzilla too, right? The Godzilla, there's a population of Godzillas. In the Showa movies, there's at least 3 Godzillas we know of for sure because we've seen on film. There's the original Godzilla, there's the one from Godzilla Raids Again onwards, and there's Manila. Now, the existence of Manila means there is at least a 4th Godzilla out there. There's somebody that laid Manila's egg. And there is no reason to assume that the Godzilla in one movie is the same as the Godzilla in the previous movie, unless the movie picks up exactly where the previous movie left off. Right, so Godzilla coming out of the iceberg in King Kong versus Godzilla is the same Godzilla as the one in Godzilla Raids Again, because that Godzilla was trapped in ice, right? So there you go. But after that, it's anybody's game. There's no guarantee that that is the same Godzilla as before. There has to be a population of Godzillas in order for the Godzillas to exist. Otherwise, Godzilla is like just like some weird mythic fantasy dragon monster, right? There has to be a population of Kongs, right? Because you have King Kong, there's Son of Kong, so that's 2, and Son of Kong, his existence implies at least one other female Kong, right? So there's got to be a population of these monsters. Like that's just how it works. Right? That's how genetics works. So same thing with like monsters in real life, right? Like there has to be a population of Loch Ness monsters. There has to be a population of Ogopogos. There has to be a population of Bigfoots. There would have to be a population of Triceratops in Spain in order for there to be any at all. And we haven't found them. So, don't know what to say about that. Why don't I believe in the Patterson Gimlin footage? It looks like a person in a costume. I don't know what else to say about that. There's no physical evidence to support that the video is anything other than guys in a costume. I am inclined to agree with the assessments of the film that you can see a zipper and you can see boots and stuff. And I forget if anybody admitted it was a hoax or not. I feel like I've heard that. I don't know if it's true that anybody admitted that it was a hoax. But yeah, I don't. It to me, it's pretty obvious. Like it's, and in some ways, it's too good as well. Like it's too clear footage of a Bigfoot. Um, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. It's. I will also add as well here. This is what I wrote in my book. That Bigfoot would be an evolutionary outlier as well. There is nothing like a Bigfoot in the fossil record. Human evolution. You know, you look at our lineage in Africa. You look at the Australopithecines. You look at the evolution of Homo sapiens, what led up to us through like Homo erectus and so on. And there's nothing like a Bigfoot. Like nothing at all. Gigantopithecus was a giant orangutan. So nothing at all like a Bigfoot. The closest thing to a Bigfoot is Australopithecus robustus or Paranthropus robustus. So it's like basically like a bipedal gorilla that lived in Africa like 4 million years ago. Except this thing was only like 4 feet tall. Like it wasn't very big. So it wasn't Bigfoot size. And Australopithecines never left Africa. So like there's nothing at all in the fossil record like a Bigfoot. So it's like I'd like to believe in it, like sure, and I enjoy Sasquatch as a cultural icon, but there's no fossil evidence for anything even like a Bigfoot ever existing at all, let alone there still being any like a population of these things in the Pacific Northwest. And then along come a bunch of guys who, you know, produce a video that looks like some dude running around in a gorilla costume. And it's like, okay. So I'm pretty skeptical about that. Ever hear of the Jersey Devil? I have heard of the Jersey Devil, but I've not given it a whole lot of mental energy. I love cryptozoology. Yeah, well, like crypto's like I know I sound like I'm kind of crapping on it all, and I don't mean to sound like I'm crapping on it all, and I apologize if I'm hurting anybody's feelings. Um, I think cryptozoology, when you do it as a proper science, I think is valuable, right? So if you're following the scientific method, you're investigating, you're gathering evidence, like solid, real physical evidence, and you're publishing it, and you're um, providing the evidence for scrutiny in actual scientific journals and stuff. I think that is a good and relevant science. That's how we find some of these animals we didn't know about before, like the Qvang ox. Um, how we discover gorillas to begin with, right? Okapi, the coelacanths that are off the coast of Indonesia and Madagascar, right? There's still things out there we haven't discovered yet. So I think the investigation of them, as long as it's done in a proper scientific manner, I think is a valuable science. It just has to be done in a proper scientific manner. And this sort of like, finding footprints of bears and people who don't know what waves look like and videos that are more likely than not a hoax isn't the way to go about it, right? We need actual solid physical evidence that we can do DNA analysis on. We need give me a corpse, give me a captured animal, capture a Bigfoot. Um, yeah, that's the stuff that I want for it to be real science. Um, so otherwise, it's sort of like cryptozoology is sort of like a neat fringe sort of cultural thing to me, whereas like jackalopes and Bigfoots and Ogopogos are neat cultural icons. Um, Walter's talking to Merton. Yes, I've seen a video about a bigger T Rex. For now, speculation since the fossil record is incomplete. Some gigantism would have happened among T Rex. Yeah, it could just be a big individual. Yeah. Ashley, what's your squeeest fossil in your collection? Ooh, let me give that one some thought. I always thought Son of Godzilla took place right before Destroy All Monsters. Um, I don't know. Does Son of Godzilla even have a date? I know continuity wise, Destroy All Monsters is the last movie. It even technically takes place after like the Mechagodzilla movies and stuff, because those take place in the 70s, while Destroy All Monsters takes place in the year 1990X. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. When I was young, I wanted to believe in dinosaurs like creatures like Nessie and Moklemembe because I love dinosaurs so much. Yeah, no, I hear you. I became interested in cryptids because I loved dinosaurs and because I wanted the world to be a more interesting place than I thought it was. Um, I wanted there to be aliens. I wanted there to be a Loch Ness monster. I wanted there to be Bigfoot because I thought, in my young naivete, that the world was boring and that these things would make it cooler and that, how exciting is it that there's like, the government is hiding this stuff from us, right? But as I got older and started learning more, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And now just understanding the actual world around us as it is like endlessly fascinating, right? So I was talking before about um, learning about the Burgess Shale, learning about the rocks here in the Rockies, and now that I know so much more about that story, about why the Burgess Shale existed, like why it happened there, why we find that site there, and the geologic forces that have been active over 1 billion years that have made it that way, um, to me is like infinitely interesting. In some ways, even way more interesting than Bigfoot. you to find out like what those layers mean and to be able to look at them and know what they're saying, what that story is, to know why this thing is here, why that thing is there, why that's the way it is, what those rocks are telling us. To me, has filled that niche that wanting aliens and Bigfoots and stuff like that to exist did when I was a kid. Um, so that's sort of my hymn to science, as it were. That that I still think Bigfoot is cool, and I have like Bigfoot toys and stuffies, and I have Ogopogo collectibles and stuff. Um, and I have my jackalope, but to me, the real science is the endlessly fascinating thing. Monster Island. You can pick a little bit of continuity within the Godzilla franchise. Oh yeah, you can, certainly. Um, but I'm just saying, it's with Godzilla, there's no automatic reason to assume that it's always the same Godzilla. And that would even actually nicely explain Godzilla's shift in personality as well. And the changes in the costume over time as well. Like, why does the Godzilla in, King Kong versus Godzilla look different from the Godzilla in versus Hedorah? Maybe it's not the same Godzilla. Maybe it's a different Godzilla, right? Godzilla's Revenge is non-canon. Wasn't the Patterson film admitted as a hoax? Yeah, we made it, that sort of thing. Yeah, Douglas, I feel like it was. I'm not sure if I'm mixing that up with Loch Ness Monster videos that were acknowledged hoaxes. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't surprise me if somebody cracked and admitted the Patterson video as a hoax. What if Bigfoot's an extraterrestrial? I mean, maybe, but now we're going beyond parsimonious explanations, right? So it's like, okay, Bigfoot exists, but there's nothing like Bigfoot in the fossil record, so maybe Bigfoot's an alien. Okay, so now aliens exist. They all look like Chewbacca, right? There actually was a story, or it's like a comic or something, where like Han and Chewbacca come to Earth, and Han dies, and Chewbacca is the one left running around, and he becomes the basis for like Bigfoot legends, or something like that. Reptilians actually exist. They actually found footprints of the abominable snowman. Well, it's maybe. It's confirmed Destroy All Monsters takes place in the year 1999. Yes. Did you ever see Baby Secret Lost Legend? That was actually based on stories about sightings of dinosaurs in Africa. Yeah, that's based on Mowgli Membi, which is a Mowgli Membi is this legendary creature that's said to live in a lake in Tanzania. And people try to say, oh, it's actually like a sauropod dinosaur, like Brontosaurus. Except none of the African tribes people said it looked like that until Europeans like showed them photos of Brontosaurus and were like, okay, sure, I guess that's what you want to hear. And sauropods didn't really live in lakes either. We've known since the 60s when work by like Robert Bacher on the physics of sauropod feet is that they wouldn't have actually lived very well in lakes, in bodies of water. They were more like dry land animals because they have such tiny little feet that they would sink into soft substrate, soft soil and mud and stuff like that. So that's kind of two strikes against Mowgli Membi as a dinosaur. Now, if there is a Mowgli Membi, maybe it could be whatever. Probably not a sauropod dinosaur though. But I have seen Baby. I saw it when I was a kid. Because I was a kid who loved dinosaurs. So I did see it in the theater, but I have not seen it since then. So I cannot vouch for it as an adult here. But yes, I have seen it. Oh, now Ashley asked, what's my squeezed fossil in my collection? Squeezed. Eh? Also, my body parts of mammoths. So my mammoth hair, and my mammoth tusk, and my mammoth pendant made out of mammoth, and my mammoth tooth, which I think I showed you guys last time, or a previous time, and my mammoth bone that's been chewed on by rodents. So that's all fun. I almost one time bought a piece of baby mammoth tusk to go with my baby mammoth tooth, but I decided that would be too sad for my fossil collection. There is my there's this beetle, which comes from the McKittrick tar pits, which is an equivalent site to the La Brea tar pits in California. So that's a water beetle in this chunk of tar right here. So that's pretty squee as well. That's Ice Age related squeeness. There is, there's my manatee tooth. That's pretty squee right there. Prehistoric manatee. I could just go down through each drawer and find what's the squeest thing in that drawer, even. Let's Let's see. Do I have that squee? Oh, this is kind of squee right here. This is a piece of Triassic animal bone. Not sure exactly what it's from. There's a couple possibilities. Most likely is a phytosaur, which is a prehistoric reptile that filled the niche of crocodiles back in the Triassic. Could be from something like a Desmatosuchus, so like one of those guys, which were what crocodiles were doing back then. Could be from a turtle. Could be from a type of amphibian called a metoposaur, which were salamanders that were like people size. Because I've always said that salamanders would be terrifying predators if they were people sized. Metoposaurs were. So there's that. My trackway is here, which you can't see because my sidebar's in the way. So this trackway right here from the Grand Canyon area. My petrified wood from Arizona there is pretty squee. Yeah, my ripples, pretty squee. What else might be squee in my collection? My piece of the moon is pretty squee. If I've showed you guys this, yeah, this is my chunk of the moon right there. So that's a piece of a lunar meteorite. So a meteorite that was a chunk of the moon that was blown off and then crashed here on Earth. So that's a slice from that. This one comes from Africa. So a meteorite that crashed in Africa. So that's a piece of the moon right there. That's pretty sweet. Yeah. I do have a lot of cool stuff, so it's hard to pick out what's the most squee stuff that I have. Going down here, this is a type of rock right here that is only known from a site here in Alberta and a site in Mozambique. It is a type of volcanic rock called Blairmorite. And it was deposited by a volcano that is in what's now British Columbia 110 million years ago. And then when everything was pushed inland as North America was being pushed, well, still is being pushed westward, those rocks got pushed here into Alberta and are found in the Crow's Nest Pass here in Alberta. So that's pretty squee right there. Yeah, we've got a lot of squee stuff. So that's depends what I'm into at any given moment. Right now, it's a lot of it's also a lot of those rocks from down Waterton Glacier way. There's lovely red and green rocks and the stromatolites and stuff as well. It's 4K scan of Patterson film, and the face of Patty's face looks pretty convincing. Pretty convincing as what? As a Bigfoot or as a human? Why didn't the Japanese build a space station on the moon by 1999 like they did in the movie? Well, the space race, basically we got to the moon and then said forget it at that point. There's a lot of dreams that we had back in the 60s, eh? Kind of got lost beneath the weight of Vietnam and the concerns of the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement is good. Stonewall was good. Because people should have equal rights. It's just it's just a little unfortunate, I suppose, that we got in addressing those valid concerns that we also forgot about space. Right? Our attention turned elsewhere, and the OPEC oil crisis and all that sort of stuff. The 70s were a bad time. The 70s were lame. 70s sucked for movies, the 70s sucked for culture, 70s sucked for a lot of things. And that set us back. You see that stupid meme that goes around of like the Christian Dark Ages, and we'd be exploring other galaxies by now if it weren't for the evil Christians. It's like, no, man, that's the 1970s did that. It's the Dark Age of the 1970s. Historical Monsters did accurately predict Skype. Yeah, I suppose it did. And the Jetsons actually predicted flat screens and treadmills. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's weird when you think about like, oh, where's my flying car? It's like, yeah, we don't have those. But like everything else in Star Trek and Jetsons and stuff like that did come true. You know, we have cell phones, we have Skype, we have this, that, and the other thing, right? Like we have all those inventions. A lot of them were created by the influence of Star Trek and the Jetsons and things. It's because everybody fixates on the flying car, right? Plus, you know, it also, we didn't create them as part of this like, you know, utopian sort of post-scarcity economy like Star Trek, right? It's just, you know, you have to pay like Elon Musk to use it or something. So everybody's mad at it. It's capitalist, right? So that makes it bad. They didn't have reusable spacecraft to destroy all monsters. A lot more advanced than the space shuttle. Yeah. Yeah, actually, what's interesting, I think I talk about this actually in my video on Disney's Tomorrowland, which like nobody's watched, which is that when you watch the Disney Man in Space trilogy, so these 3 episodes of the Disney TV series that Walt Disney made, there's Man in Space, and it shows sort of our first flights into orbit. And then there's Man in the Moon, where they build a space station in orbit. And then at the space station, that's where they build a ship to go to the moon. And then in Mars and Beyond, the 3rd episode, they build these spaceships to go to Mars and establish a colony. And you look at those 3 episodes and you're like, that makes way more sense than what we actually did. Because what we actually did is we just kept building bigger and bigger rockets to just keep flinging people into space. The process of like establishing a space station and then using that to build craft like spaceships in space that are custom made for space actually makes a ton more sense than what we did in real life. But now we're so degraded we can't even imagine doing that. Like in the friggin' J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies where like they built the Enterprise on the ground. Like what? Like that structure wouldn't even work on under gravity. Like the Enterprise would fall apart under gravity. So it's just like, why people are dumb. That's the only explanation I have for it. And I say that, and then I wonder why people don't like me. Star Trek invented the flip phone, yeah. Jules Verne the submarine, yeah. Somebody needs to invent a real life transporter. Master of the world, clever guy that Verne, yeah. Yeah, a transporter would be great, but it also would be terrifying. One of the... I mean, I would love to be able to just, like... Okay, here's the thing. I would love to be able to just transport to, like, Disneyland. Where you're like, I feel like going to Disneyland. Zoop! And there we go. We're at Disneyland now. Yeah, me and 5 billion other people all descending on Disneyland at the same time. Everyone wants to go to Disneyland, right? So, like, how do you manage that? Because transporters would then create an insane amount of demand on everywhere, because everyone would want to go everywhere all the time. The economy would fall apart. However, keeping in mind, in Star Trek, transporter technology and replicator technology are very closely related to each other. And replicators are why Star Trek is the way it is. So what everyone always gets wrong about Star Trek, one of the reasons why Star Trek has not always been woke, is that Star Trek is not a communist government. Star Trek is a post-scarcity economy. So what do they do now that you have a replicator that can make anything? Right? You don't have to worry about food anymore. You don't have to worry about medicine anymore. You don't have to worry about all this stuff because you can just replicate it. So now what? Money is practically meaningless. But land is not. There's private property in Star Trek. So that's what people get wrong, is that you're not going to get to Star Trek with a communist revolution. You're going to get to Star Trek once you figure out how to create food out of thin air. That's when you're going to get to Star Trek. And that might never be possible. But anyways, I digress. The other thing that's weird about teleporters is that they are the most terrifying weapon ever developed by humankind. And it's never used as a weapon, which is crazy. Like, okay, oh, the Klingons are off the port bow, Captain. All right, lock onto them with the teleporters and scatter their atoms into space. Like, that's all you'd have to do. right? Teleporters are an insane, terrifying weapon of mass destruction, but they're never used that way in Star Trek, um, because it would be devastating. Otherwise, like, it would wipe out everything. Everyone would be teleporting everyone else into atoms. So it's yeah, and if we develop teleporters, guaranteed that's how we would use them. Like, you're telling me that Vladimir Putin wouldn't be teleporting Ukrainians into atoms? Like, yeah, right. So yeah, it's teleporters. Great idea, but we would have to evolve to the point where we wouldn't use them as a weapon, and we're not there yet. Let alone having the technological know-how, let alone the philosophical question, like, what does a teleporter do, and are you still you after you've been through it? And yeah, anyways, lots of stuff around teleporters. So it's really, teleporters are just a very handy plot device, so you don't have to have them going in shuttles down to the planets all the time. That's really what teleporters are for. J.J. Abrams single-handedly destroyed Star Trek. Yes, I do blame him for everything that has happened to Star Trek since. Bad Robot and Secret Hideout are the worst things to happen to Star Trek. And I thought that, like Enterprise, way back there in the early 2000s, I thought Enterprise had issues. Man, go back and watch Enterprise now, and it's like, wow, I misjudged this show just by virtue of comparing it to the garbage that passes for Star Trek now. Don't they still have currency in Star Trek? Yes, they do have currencies in Star Trek. Gold pressed latinum is a currency that is not used in the Federation. That is a currency used primarily among the Ferengi. But they do have a system of credits in the Federation that is essentially money in all but name. I mean, they make a joke out of it, like, "Oh, we humans, we don't know money because we've evolved past using it." But they do have systems of credits. And I'm not even talking about Star Trek Online, where there's like a dozen different forms of currency in that game. That's a video game. That's a different story. But there are systems of currency in Star Trek because there are things you have to manage. Energy in Star Trek is actually not infinite. This is a point in Voyager that they used for the first couple seasons and then dropped it. Was that now that they're stranded in the Delta Quadrant, they have to ration energy. You can't just replicate whatever you want because that uses energy, and now they have limited energy resources because they're stranded in the Delta Quadrant. So they had to ration the energy, and then the crew started bartering energy with each other. So that's a system of currency. That's just reinventing money at that point. Yeah, and there's like, there's property in Star Trek. Right? The Picards own a vineyard and they produce wine. And who gets to have that wine? I wonder how they decide that. Right? Are they just giving it away? But there's only so much land to grow so many grapes to produce so much wine. So how do they decide who gets the wine? Well, they never talk about that, but take a wild guess. How do you allocate a limited resource? That's what money is. Dilithium, still valuable in Star Trek, yeah. Well, in the original series, even, there were like private dilithium mining outfits. Like, they produced dilithium and the Federation bought the dilithium from them. So, Cronenberg's The Fly's the reason I don't want teleporters. Yeah. That's the other issue, is the technology, right? Like, it's one thing to deconstruct your atoms, it's another thing to reconstruct them in the right order and not to include things that weren't there to begin with. For example, not even flies. Like a fly is one thing. What about all the things that are crawling around on your skin right now? Right? Like, human beings are an ecosystem. We have like mites and bacteria and stuff living on our skin, living in our guts. Do they get teleported too? Do they get reconstructed the way they're supposed to be? Or when you get teleported, is it going to be without all of those? So now suddenly you don't have any gut flora anymore and you can't digest anything? Or are you going to like get merged with them and become this like horrifying monstrosity that's like part bacteria and part like mite and part human? Like, ugh. Yeah. So like, that's even something to consider, right? Like, how do you teleport your body flora and fauna and stuff, right? Like, it's just, yeah. It's a lot to consider. It's a lot to work out, which is why they never really discuss it in Star Trek. It's just a plot device to get characters from point A to point B quickly. Enterprise is a masterpiece by comparison. Yeah. Well, I will say this for Enterprise. Okay. It started out really strong. I still think Enterprise had the best first episode of any Star Trek. Broken Bow is a great episode for establishing the setting, the story, who the characters are, the relationship between them. Like, it's perfect. It's the best first episode of any Star Trek. But then by the middle of the first season, it's like just like this garbage with like the Ferengi, but we didn't say they were the Ferengi, so it doesn't break canon technically. It's like, oh, shut up. And then it just like drops off on seasons like 2 and 3 with like all this stuff with like the sphere builders and all this sort of nonsense. I know they're trying to be all like, oh, we're responding to the post 9/11 world. But it's like, that's not why you want to do a prequel to Star Trek. A prequel to Star Trek should be showing a universe that is in enough disarray that the Federation is required, right? The whole point of the show is to build up to the Federation. And we want to see like the classic species, right? We want to see the Andorians and the Vulcans and the Tellarites and whoever else, the classic Star Trek aliens, and learn more about them. Now, luckily, in the 4th season, they pulled that back around. The 4th season of Enterprise is great. You've got the Augment storyline. You've got the stuff with the Klingons, the flat foreheads. You've got the like Terra Nova and like that whole thing. And then the last episode of Enterprise is absolute garbage. I couldn't believe how insulting that last episode was. Yeah, so Enterprise, I mean, it has its high parts, but still, even in comparison to modern Star Trek, which is just Star Trek in name only, yeah. Favorite Star Trek is Deep Space Nine. Same. Deep Space Nine is a brilliant show, and that was my favorite Star Trek by far. Deep Space Nine, because in Deep Space Nine they couldn't just like fly to the planet of the week and solve their problem and leave and fly off again. They're like have to sit there and deal with complex social and political issues, and everything from like creationism to war, dealing with all these complex issues. And they have to sit there and do it. They can't just fly off and abandon the planet after they fixed it, right? So yeah, Deep Space Nine was great. People still drink in the future? Well, Romulan ale, right? You don't want to wind up like Brundlefly? Nobody wants to end up like Brundlefly. Blah. The whole show was a holodeck simulation. Which whole show? Oh, well. Now we've wound around truly far. Dinosaurs, Voyager, the Voth. I've been fighting them in Star Trek Online a lot lately. So there are dinosaurs in Star Trek. There's also a novel where, like, the original series crew, they go back in time to see dinosaurs. But I haven't read that novel. Well, it's 9:49. So this has been going on for a long time. They didn't know how to end Enterprise. Well, oh God. Okay. If they had done it intelligently from the beginning, then they could have ended it fine. But they had to rush the ending because they got canceled because the show was crap for too long. Too little too late when they got to the 4th season. And the part that I find insulting about it, though, is that the last episode of Enterprise is like a holodeck. Yeah, the whole show's a holodeck simulation. Yeah. That the last episode was just a holodeck simulation on the Enterprise D. And then, you're like, okay, the whole point of Enterprise was that it was going to lead to the creation of the Federation, right? Like, you knew when it started that the last episode was going to be the creation of the Federation. And you have Riker and Troy, they're sitting there on the holodeck, they're seeing the ceremony, they decide, oh, we don't need to watch this, and they turn around and walk out. I'm like, are you kidding me? That was the point. That was the payoff, was being able to see the Federation being created. And they turn around and walk out the holodeck. Like, that was the biggest FU to the fans that to that point. Now, I mean, of course, all of Star Trek is a big FU to the fans now. But I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that last episode, which is why the previous episode, the penultimate episode, which wrapped up that storyline with like the xenophobic human terrorists, that one and Archer's speech at the end of that episode, that was the real ending for Enterprise. The last episode of Enterprise is just a piece of garbage. And yes, I'm passionate about it because I did used to like Star Trek a lot. I was a total like hardcore Trekkie. I went to conventions and stuff here in the city. Um, and then Enterprise kind of betrayed that, and now Star Trek is absolute garbage. And the Orville is the best actual Star Trek show. You know, that's me getting opinionated about it. I like the theme song for Enterprise, very inspirational. Yeah, theme song was all right. I appreciate they were trying to do something different, and I liked one of the things I liked about Enterprise is that it was like earthier, in the sense that like they used rock music. The characters were much more like people today. The technology was chunkier. The uniforms were like overalls. you you get to like Next Generation, and they're all wearing pajamas on this like super slick office building in space with touch panels, whereas Enterprise is like chunkier and they're wearing overalls, and they're the the theme song is rock music. Um, I liked those aspects of it because it's supposed to be primitive, right? Like it's a prequel to the original series. It takes place in the 22nd century. It's supposed to be more primitive than Next Generation, which is also one of the reasons, one of the many things to complain about with modern Star Trek is that this stuff is supposed to be in the prime timeline, supposedly, which is just a marketing thing. And it's supposed to be prequels to the original series, but everything looks like super slick and high tech and like futuristic, even compared to Next Generation. And it's just like, nope, wrong, 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 wrong. Wasn't Red Dwarf a VR game? Red Dwarf was very imaginative and funny. It's been a long road. Get from here to whatever. I don't know. I'm not gonna bother singing that. All right. Well, as you know, it's almost 10 o'clock my time, so I'm going to gonna draw this to a close, which means it is time for some previews. All right, so upcoming videos that I'm going to be doing here that have already been made and they're just in the queue waiting to come out. So, continuing my Why Movies Are So Great series, The Wolfman. I am going to finally get around to that one. Continuing that series, talking about what I love so much about Universal Monsters. So this one's going to be on The Wolfman, which is one of the greatest of the series. So that one's coming up here. Also, I've been doing a lot of reading on King Kong lately and research on the original plans for the Son of Kong. So I'm going to do a video on what that movie was originally supposed to be and what we could have seen had they had more of a budget and that sort of thing. Yeah. And then this one, which is sort of a weird little thing I did, which is scientifically figure out which are my favorite Showa Godzilla movies. So I actually found a way to figure out, so not just to create a list of like, oh, these are the ones that I think I like, but I actually studied which ones I like which ones I choose to watch and stuff like that. And I'll talk about how I did that in the video. But this one's coming up, is my top my ranking of Showa Godzilla movies that I figured out scientifically. And then our next live stream, which you already know because we did the vote last time. I said the vote was just for deciding which one we're doing first. So next month's live stream is going to be Atomic Age Victorian Sci-Fi, which we talked about a bit this time around. We were talking about like journey to the center of the Earth, and at the Earth's core, and those sorts of things. Atomic Age Victorian sci-fi movies, but I have zero doubt that our live stream will wander all over the place, as our live streams tend to do, which I thoroughly enjoy. That is not a complaint. I enjoy that our live streams wander all over the place. The theme is just sort of something to get it started, to have a baseline of things to talk about, but the fact they wander all over the place is great. I love the conversation. I love engaging with you guys, and we have a good time. I like to think. At least I have a good time. And Ashley says it was fun. So there we go. Even as pure in heart, yeah, whatever happened to Mrs. Kong? Ooh, that's a good question. I love all the Showa Godzilla movies. I also, well, I wouldn't say I love all of them, but I do enjoy them in general, and I do have an order that in which I like them, which I have figured out scientifically. Gonna be some pretty interesting upcoming videos. Another video that I'm working on, I have the intention to make, I'm just getting around to it, is I am going to track down the birthplace of Fay Ray. I want to do a video about that, because that is something that I can do. Because unlike, say, like Grim Life Collective, who do great videos, and I love, if you've not subscribed to Grim Life Collective, go do that, go find them. But they live in Hollywood, so they can do all sorts of stuff. But, oh, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. But finding where Fay Ray was born, that's what I can do, because she is from Alberta. She's from my province. So that's something I can do. So I'm planning on doing a video with that. I just have to actually go out and film it here, which I'm hoping to do in the next couple weeks at least. So that one also will be upcoming at some point as well. Cannot wait for The Wolfman, one of my favorite movies. Yes. Where would science fiction be without Jules Verne and H.G. Wells? Pretty dire straits, I would think. We did have a good time. I even like Godzilla Raids Again. I like Godzilla Raids Again. In fact, I even know exactly how much I like it. So, yeah. So, there we go. That is this month's live stream. Once again, next month's will be towards the end of the month at some point. It might not be on the last Thursday of the month, just because I think that Thursday we're actually coming back from a trip to Glacier National Park in Montana. So that might be a vacation week. So I might end up bumping it up. I have to just look at the schedule and see where it'll fit in. But as always, I'll post it a week beforehand and let everybody know. Or I might change the date as well. See if maybe changing, like putting on a weekend might get more people involved. I don't know. But I think I said that last time too. But I've been busy, so. But we'll figure it out. Either way, there will be that next month. We can all get together again, and we can all have a nice chat. And yeah. So with that, thank you very much. I'll bid you adieu with our usual goodnight video.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.